himself on purpose. Inga's eyes were wide as she stared at her boss. You want him to work here? Like I said, if he's going to come by and distract my employee, then he might as well learn a thing or two. I really didn't. Just needed stitches, Mara. Isn't really necessary. Embarrassing. Finn felt his face go up in flames as he and Inga talked over each other. Mara finally laughed and waved her arms in the space between them. Finn, just come by tomorrow and we'll see what we can do. All right. Okay. Good. Off with you then. Inga looked mortified. But Mara. Now Inga, you've been whining about wanting a co-worker for ages. Now again, Mara's smirk was so evil, Finn could swear she'd planned this all along. You've got one. Chapter 16, Tension. Chapter text. The space between Eric's eyebrows gave a twinge as a headache began to bloom. He'd come to work early to avoid as many watching eyes as possible. Now, nearing mid-afternoon, he could feel the exhaustion creeping up on him that only another sleepless night could bring. His thoughts were on Adriana almost constantly. He wanted to fly to her house and see how she was doing and make sure she was resting from her rough trip. He wanted to know what had happened out there, why the ship she'd stolen was in shambles, why Lily had come home injured from what looked like a dragon fight, why Finn had copious amounts of blood dried all over his flight suit. Clearly something had gone down. But now, due to his own stupidity, he'd lost his privilege of barging into the Haddock household at any time to ask questions or see how everyone was doing. Their doors had been open to him since he was a little boy. Especially since his father died. It had taken a long time for him to go to the Haddocks for help and support, but he'd come to lean on them almost like they were his own parents. Now he'd have to learn how to go without. Astrid hadn't given him a second glance when she flew to the council meeting this morning. Finn had glared at him from the forge window like he was about to run out and knock his teeth out. But hiccup. They'd made eye contact from across the street when Eric and Cliff were on lunch break. The chief had stood there watching them with a flat expression and a judging eye before walking away. His very body language screamed, "Your fault. This is all your fault." Eric didn't want the chief and his family to hate him. But honestly, what could he have done? He could have told them sooner and prevented Adriana from running away, but what would that have changed? He hadn't saved her from being raped by that worthless pig. He hadn't protected her any more than Hiccup had. They'd all been duped. Except Eric. Maybe that was why Hiccup felt justified in blaming Eric. He'd fought with Brandine mere weeks ago over Adriana's honor. The bruising around his eye was finally fading, the color returning to normal. But he still wore the bruises on his heart more than he wanted to admit. For all that defending her honor and trying to protect her, Brandine had already had his way. Brandine had already hurt her. It didn't matter that Eric had known there was something fishy about him. He stood around and did nothing and assumed that all his bitterness and jealousy was petty and childish. He ignored all the bells going off in his head, every instinct to pull her away. He let his best friend, his Annie, get hurt. That was why Hiccup hated him. And that meant that his Annie was no longer his. Completely ridiculous. I mean, who bakes banana bread without chocolate chips? That's almost as depressing as your mom baking you chocolate chip cookies only to find out that, newsflash, they're oatmeal raisin. Are you kidding me? Chocolate should be integrated into everything baked. Baking, bacon. Eric huffed, trying to tune Cliff out again. His friend had been rambling about nothing and everything for the last hour and he was almost at the end of his rope. His head pounded again. Bacon! Cliff exclaimed, cutting off the momentary silence. Oh, bacon and chocolate. I wonder what that would taste like. Cliff. Eric said meekly. I wonder what would happen if you baked bacon. Baked bacon, what's bacon? Cliff snorted. Cliff. That's stupid. What would happen if you baked bacon in a dessert? What kind of flavors would go with it, do you think? Eric twisted his hands into his hair, begging the gods for patience. You know what would be good? Maple syrup would be amazing with it, like a bacon cupcake with maple and cinnamon. No. Maybe maple and brown sugar frost. Cliff. His friend went quiet and Eric heard his chair squeak as he turned to look over his shoulder. He probably had that stupid confused face on like he'd forgotten he wasn't alone for the last hour. Eric took a steadying breath. I need a few minutes of quiet. Okay. Cliff must have nodded mutely, because he didn't reply. The gentle squeak of the chair was the only sound as quiet took over the space. Eric exhaled slowly and tried to soak in the silence. He probably looked as pitiful as he felt. After a while, he took up his stitching again. The headache eased a bit with the silence, but he knew it was only a matter of moments until Cliff would probably start talking again. But alas, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence first. All right boys, we haven't had a customer in over 2 hours, Horst said, wiping his oily hands with a towel. Why don't you go ahead and take off early? Okay. Cliff jumped out of his seat. Clearly the last 5 minutes of silence had been agony for him. Eric vaguely wondered if he was being extra chatty today. Maybe that was a sign of stress for him. Cliff gave him a short glance, seeing as he still hadn't moved out of his own chair yet, before ducking out of the room toward freedom. Almost instantly they heard him chatting away with some poor soul who probably didn't fancy their ear being talked off. Eric sighed and rubbed his face, staring at his pile of work sitting beside his desk. I really shouldn't leave early, Horst. You've been here since 5. Horst pulled up a chair and sat down. You're leaving early. Frowning, his thoughts swept to Adriana again. He wished he could see her. At least ask if she was alright, if she needed anything. If the baby was okay. Hiccup told the council everything. Horst said quietly. It all makes sense now. Eric nodded dimly, unsure what to say. Did Horst know what had happened outside of Berk too? He wondered if that was the first time Horst knew something about Adriana before he did. Horst seemed to hesitate, before inhaling. Eric cut him off before he could say it. I didn't touch Adriana. I know, his mentor said gently, no accusation in his tone. People think. It doesn't matter what people think, Eric. They will find out soon enough what really happened. Eric shook his head and tossed his pencil to the table, sending it rolling underneath the saddle. I'm almost willing to take the blame to spare her from that. That what? Horst asked. Shame. She didn't do anything wrong, Eric. Yes, I know that, but people won't see it that way. Eric said in frustration, the entire day's anxieties flooding out his mouth before he could stop them. They'll see it as weakness, just as they've always looked at her, like she's a stupid, insecure little thing that can't do anything right, not even protect herself from. Eric stopped with wrathful exhale, irritated that his face flushed and eyes burned. Nobody would listen to her anyway. Then why should it make any difference what people say? Horst asked, stroking his beard calmly. Eric shook his head, not knowing what else to say. He was so frustrated and tired and he wanted to help Annie, and he couldn't do anything. Horst seemed to sense his growing frustration, and changed the subject. Have you spoken to Hiccup? Eric twisted his shirt tail in his lap. He won't even look at me. You need to talk to him. About what? How I didn't say anything to him while I had the chance. Horst raised a hand placatingly. Eric, his daughter disappeared without warning. Again. Eric winced at the memory of her kidnapping at age 3. He was terrified that he'd never see her again. Then he found out she was pregnant. That another young man whom he trusted had raped her. And you didn't say anything to him. Eric, he has every reason to be upset about this. I know that. Eric exclaimed. Then you can't ignore him, Horst said patiently. They're all going to need time to process, but you're a family. He's practically a father to you. Eric sneered down at his prosthetic, the one that almost exactly matched Hiccup's with the exception of flight gear. Yeah. Some son. Finn has made plenty of mistakes. Big mistakes, too, Horst amended. Hiccup will forgive you too. What if he doesn't? Horst smiled when he finally met his mentor's eyes. He will. The idea of going to find Hiccup to talk things out terrified him. Should he get on his knees and beg for forgiveness for not saying something sooner? He'd had his reasons, petty as they were. At least, they felt petty now. Eric pushed a hand through his hair. I don't even know what to say. The words will come. Horst stood and pulled him out of his chair. Come on, I'll walk you to the hall. Is he there? He was heading to the library last I saw him, Horst said as they stepped into the sunlight. I'll give you an escort. Eric ducked his head, ignoring eye contact with everyone they passed. A few women whispered as they passed by and Eric sighed. Eric, you did nothing wrong, Horst murmured, catching his eye. So don't give them a reason to gossip by looking guilty. The words resonated with him. As embarrassing and horrifying as it was, he hadn't done anything wrong concerning Adriana. So he did not need to hide from people or act like he was guilty. Eric straightened his spine and matched Horst's pace as they weaved through the streets. Standing inside the library doorway was probably the most nerve-wracking thing he'd ever had to do. Hiccup was indeed working inside, as Horst had suspected. Whether the chief came here to work on paperwork on a regular basis, or to escape the current stresses and regular life problems, Eric didn't know. All he knew was that he needed to talk to his chief, his friend, his second father, and resolve the conflict between them. And he had no idea what to say. Matilda poked her head out from a nearby row and whispered, "Here to talk to the chief." Eric nodded mutely. She pursed her lips and nodded to a few rows down. "He's just down there. Been here most of the day and has hardly said 2 words. He's usually pretty chatty when he comes in here." Swallowing his fear, Eric shrugged. "It's been a long week." "Is that so?" Matilda asked. Eric fought the urge to frown. Matilda always did love to eavesdrop on conversations or ask innocent yet prying questions, just to stay in the know of village life. An idea popped into his head and he pulled her down a familiar aisle. "Matilda, I heard Adriana wasn't feeling well today, so she's at home resting. Would you mind bringing her a few books to keep her company?" "Of course," Matilda gushed, instantly pulling books off the shelves. "What an excellent idea." "Oh but Eric grasped her elbow and touched his lips with a finger. Hiccup might not like the idea of anyone disturbing her, so, our little secret. Matilda gave him a curious look before shrugging. "Our little secret." She bustled off to put the books in a bag before bidding the chief goodbye and marching out the door. Eric breathed a sigh, hoping Hiccup wouldn't kill him for sending Matilda to his house, especially since he outright said she wasn't feeling well. He suddenly wondered if he shouldn't go back and tell Matilda to forget it. Adriana probably had more books at home than she could count anyway. But no, he needed to talk to Hiccup in private before someone else grabbed his attention. Steeling himself, Eric marched down the hallway in search of the chief. He found Hiccup a few rows down, just as Matilda had said. He sat at a table covered in papers from left to right, a large satchel hanging off the edge of a chair. Toothless was curled up on the floor at the end of the table. The Night Fury cracked open an eye and huffed at him before going back to sleep. Hiccup didn't acknowledge his presence. Eric ignored his pounding heart and walked over to the table, staying back a few paces. He hated this fear. He didn't want to be afraid of Hiccup, but he knew what the man could do when he was pushed too far. Hiccup couldn't be hiding away from the entire village if he wasn't one loose string away from snapping. Swallowing the lump in his throat, Eric stepped forward, feeling his heart pounding in his chest. "Hiccup, you can't ignore me forever." Hiccup didn't even look up. The only telltale sign that he heard was his eyebrows creasing ever so slightly. Eric took another step forward. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for not telling you. Even though she asked me to keep it quiet, I should have said something to you and Astrid." Once the words had started, they came pouring out. "Like when I found Dana and Brandine together, I didn't tell you and took it into my own hands. Here I thought it was different because she was directly asking me not to say anything. But I see now I should have told you regardless, and I am sorry, Chief." Hiccup sat in stony silence, his charcoal pencil halting on the page. Eric waited for a few seconds for him to speak. When Hiccup began writing again and it became clear that he wasn't going to say anything, Eric turned away with a sad sigh. "Do you know what upsets me the most?" Eric paused, his shoulders stiffening. He slowly turned back, both curious and afraid. Hiccup didn't look up from his papers as he continued. "The fact that I have literally put my life on the line for her and she still doesn't trust me. piercing green eyes locked on his. But she trusts you. Shock coursed through Eric's system. He felt like Hiccup had punched him in the stomach. I'm sorry. Hiccup looked back at his papers, evidently determined to ignore him some more. I never meant to replace you. Eric was surprised to hear Hiccup mutter next, you'd think I'd be used to it by now. Not being important. Despite Hiccup's dark, almost hostile tone, Eric felt indignant at the words. You are important to her. She left because she didn't want to dis. Hiccup's head snapped up, some of that wrath coming out. Disappoint me. When are you kids going to realize that I might have strong opinions and beliefs, but I would never look at my kids and call them a disappointment? Eric stood there in silence. Hiccup pointed his pencil at him. I grew up thinking that I was a disappointment. A scrawny, useless kid that couldn't do anything right with no friends and no future because I figured my father would pick someone else to be his heir. Surprise had to be all over his face. Eric hadn't known that. To imagine Hiccup as anything but strong and useful and amazing was strange. Sarcastic, yes. Different, yes. UN traditionally not Viking, yes. But a disappointment. Hiccup was about as UN disappointing as they came. If I was good enough for my father in the end, who struggled to show love and compassion, why would I ever call my kids a disappointment? Hiccup snapped. Even after Finn tore this village apart with his bare hands, nearly got you killed, said he hated me, took off never to come back and then sent his mother and I a letter telling us he was going to kill himself, I never. Hiccup stopped, anger melting away into pain. Hurt laced across his face. Toothless sat up from his spot on the floor to croon at his friend. Eric shook his head. Hiccup. He was never a disappointment to me. Hiccup's voice was softer. Neither were you. Eric could almost feel the blades against his wrists, the blood running down his arms at the memory. And neither is she. Hiccup said quietly, looking over at Toothless. The dragon twisted around and shoved his face into Hiccup's arms in comfort. Eric nodded, taking a moment to think. Why don't you tell her that? Hiccup sighed in resignation and released Toothless' head. He began to scoop papers into a pile as he said, if you hadn't noticed, she doesn't listen to what I have to say. Why don't you tell her for me? Might make more of a difference. Exasperation clawed up Eric's throat before he could help it. Ah, Hiccup, come on. You know that's not true. Maybe she struggles to believe it because. With a raised eyebrow, Hiccup stuffed his papers inside the satchel. Because. The young man shrugged. I don't know, you don't give up easily but. Maybe you do when you're needed the most. The chief pursed his lips. Thank you for summing that up. Eric shrugged. I don't know how to explain it. I can barely figure out my own feelings. That's why you should talk to her about you too and I can deal with my own stuff. What stuff? Like how to convince the village I didn't get your daughter pregnant, for one. Hiccup winced. Yeah. Eric tapped his prosthetic against the floor anxiously for a minute. He chewed on the thought for a moment longer, hoping Hiccup, or Toothless, wouldn't claw his eyes out for saying it out loud. Okay. Can I just be honest for a bit? Hiccup sighed. Be my guest. I don't know why you're making this about you. The chief's eyes narrowed. What? Eric gathered his courage. They needed to think of Adriana first. You heard me. You're making it about you when it's not. It's about your daughter being scared and pregnant and feeling more alone than she ever has in her life. How is that in any way about you? All of us have bent over backwards in some way for her and gotten hurt as a result. She's ignored all of us at some point out of spite or anger or just pure rejection. But we've all had to get over it and she's had to come to terms with the fact that people screw up. Some of us don't do things on purpose to hurt her. Eric was rambling and he knew it. But sometimes people do things on purpose and that's when she's most hurt. And that's when you step away. It's like you take her rejection, which is based on fear, personally. Maybe she came to me because she knew I wasn't going to blame myself for what happened and actually help her do something about it. Except you didn't. Hiccup said sharply. Which in turn, caused a whole slew of other problems. Eric threw out his hands. What could I do? Honestly, what could I do? I didn't know. Do you know? Other than tell somebody who could do something, I didn't have any clue what to do. It might have kept her from running away, but we might still be sitting here having this conversation if I'd told you. You were completely unprepared for that kind of information. We all are. Eric stepped closer to the desk. My heart stopped when she told me. I don't know how I stayed calm long enough to ask if she was okay. None of us knows the right course of action here. But I know that the wrong one is to wallow in self-pity when you have a daughter and a grandchild who need you right now. I'd like to see you be a better parent. This isn't about me, and I am not making it about me. It's about Annie. Eric said just as firmly, placing his palms against the desk and staring down at the chief. You know I'm right, so stop being stubborn. He never thought there'd be a day where he'd tell off the chief to his face and survive. But here he was, doing it. And Toothless wasn't even blinking. He continued on before either of them could respond. I understand that you crave love and attention. You've always been that way, especially concerning your kids. You take Annie so seriously because you were her hero once. You still want to be that for her, I understand all that. But this isn't about you. Don't ignore it anymore, definitely discuss it with her, but you have to understand that this can't be about you. You have to let it go. Hiccup's glare gradually loosened and he finally sat back in his chair with a huff. Well, this is dignifying. Eric blinked, surprised at the sudden change of tone. What? An almost 40-year-old being told off by 17-year-old. 18. Eric straightened indignantly. Shut up. Eric snickered, the tension finally breaking. Toothless wiggled in place at the sound, sniffing Eric's shirt as if he was looking for fish. Hiccup sighed heavily. You're right. You're right. Eric scratched Toothless' scales. It's all right, Dad. You've taught me plenty. Hiccup frowned again. He wasn't sure why, but the young man knew this wouldn't be resolved in one day. It would take time and effort to break old habits. Eric dropped his hands from Toothless' head and walked around the desk. Stop that face. Hiccup sighed again and stood, accepting Eric's hug. I'm sorry. Hiccup hugged him tight. Don't be. I probably wouldn't have done any better at 18 if this happened to my friend. Eric nearly choked at the word friend. He almost felt defensive in a way. He didn't even feel like he qualified as a mere friend anymore. He cared about Adriana so much, he wanted to make sure that nothing else would go wrong for her or her child. He didn't know when he'd become so fiercely attached. Was Brandine's betrayal and abuse the thing that set him off? He didn't know, but even if it killed him, he'd make sure that nobody would ever hurt her like Brandine had. Never again. Instead of voicing these thoughts, he merely pulled away and shrugged. Yeah, well, I've still got a lot to learn. That you do, kiddo. Eric sighed, feeling lighter and freer than he had in a few days. There was still a lot to do, a lot of issues to address, but mending his friendship with his father figure was a healthy step one. He'd have to remember to thank Horst later with sweet rolls, and hide them from Cliff. So. Hiccup slung an arm over Toothless' back. What? Eric tried not to feel embarrassed, but. What are we going to do about Addie, Brandine, the rumors? All of the above. The blonde waved a hand. Specifically the rumor. I don't want my name to go down in history as the guy that. Yeah. The chief scratched his stubbly cheek. You won't. I have an idea how to kill that. I don't think it will make it all stop, but it will ease the people who aren't sure. The teen cocked his head. What do you mean? Hiccup made eye contact with Toothless, as if they could hear each other's thoughts somehow. I think I need to announce it to the village. Eric gaped. Really? I don't know, I'm still trying to think of another option. But I think that might be the only way to clear your name, explain Addie's running away. All of it. We'll gain support over the dissent. And then. Hiccup smiled a little. And then we're having a baby. Eric gulped, the idea of that happening still so foreign and strange. His childhood best friend, The girl he'd loved for as long as he could remember was actually having a baby. He wondered how long it would take for her to actually show, or if she'd have crazy crying spells over nothing like Magnus did. Oh gods, what if she wanted to have pickles and chocolate as a snack? Hiccup snickered, pulling him out of his reverie. What? You look like I did. Except I'm not. I know, but it's still funny. So you were nervous. Hiccup grabbed his satchel with a laugh. Toothless also chortled as he moved between the rows of books toward the doors. Eric smirked. I'm going to take that as a yes. Together they walked toward the doors. I was nervous, yeah. But when you're holding your son and daughter in my case, you don't think about it so much. Eric nodded, wondering if he should voice his thoughts. Great. Hiccup looked at him quizzically. What? Now would be the perfect time to voice his thoughts. But no. It was too soon. Do you want to get dinner? Maybe if people see you not killing me, they'll relax. It's worth a shot for now. We'll confuse them at any rate. Hiccup smiled and slung an arm across his shoulders, almost making Eric feel like a little kid again. Their loss. We've got a good thing going, this father/son thing. Eric grinned, but elbowed him in the ribs. Yeah, but we'd better let Finn get in on some of the action. Wouldn't want to lose another foot. Ha ha ha, that's not funny. Toothless chortled as he ran past them around the corner, probably in search of unguarded plates full of fish. For a while after dinner, which she just barely managed to choke down, Adriana lay on her bed and tossed a fifth book onto the pile. For once in her life, she was tired of reading. Usually she could ignore what was bothering her and immerse herself into a different setting with different people. She'd read until her eyes hurt, or she got hungry, or had to use the outhouse so badly she thought her bladder might rupture. Now, that seemed to be every 10 minutes. And the nausea was killing her slowly from the inside out. Did she even have a stomach anymore? Adriana sighed, staring down her torso at her stomach. Still flat, but not for much longer. Pregnant. The word echoed in her head again and she slung an arm across her eyes. It still boggled her mind, even after all this time. Even after her harrowing adventure to Rune. Everyone in the village was whispering about her and Eric as if they'd. She still couldn't wrap her mind around the fact that all this had happened in the first place. That she'd dated such a vile man at all who'd do such a thing to her. And people had the gall to think Eric would. Oh, shut up. Adriana muttered to herself. She'd been going around in circles in her head all day, lying around in bed for the last 2. She couldn't take it anymore. She had to move around. Stretching and pulling on a pair of slippers, Adriana stepped outside of her bedroom. The house was quiet. Finn hadn't come home yet, he was still avoiding her like the plague. She wondered where her mother was. Usually she'd be in the living room sharpening her weapons by this time, but no sounds of a wetting stone sliding across metal could be heard from downstairs. The gentle sound of scraping paper caught her attention from her parents' room. The door was slightly ajar, so she quietly crept forward and leaned into the doorway. Hiccup was sitting against the wall with a box of mementos next to him on the floor. Drawings, dozens of hair ribbons, small clay figures, dried flowers, a small stuffed night fury, a tiny pair of boots aged with time, and a small, familiar doll littered the floor. Mr. Gobcup? Adriana asked, stepping closer. Her dad jumped and quickly exhaled. You're definitely your mother's daughter. What do you mean? You're really stealthy when you want to be. Sorry. Adriana glanced back toward her bedroom. I'll go if you want. It's fine, I just didn't hear you. Hiccup smiled. Adriana slid to the floor in front of the pile of random items. She looked at it all with curiosity. What is all this? This Hiccup smiled, picking up the box. Is your baby box? Baby box? Yeah, your mom and I kept a bunch of little trinkets and mementos from your childhood. And Finn's. His is in a separate box. Or? Adriana smiled, looking at a few drawings. That's cute. I thought so. Did Mom? She warmed to the idea after a few hours of thought. Hiccup snorted. She deemed it a worthy idea after a while. So sentimental. Adriana breathed a laugh. What's this? She held up a small folded skirt in a light purple. That was your favorite skirt when you were little. Well, second favorite. The first. Hiccup shook his head. You loved that one. Used to wear it everywhere. You can say it, Dad. Adriana put the skirt back down. That's the one Trista destroyed. There was a long pause in which he avoided eye contact before she smiled again. Hair ribbons. Why'd you keep these? Why not? Hiccup shrugged. Your mom used to put your hair in pigtails with those. It was cute. Well, with a face like mine, of course it was cute, her dad snorted. Adriana held up one of the ribbons. Not sure I could do that now. Nah, your hair's too thick for those wimpy ribbons. You've outgrown all the clothes in here. Really? Adriana gasped, holding the tiny boots up to her feet. Man, I was so excited. Oh, be quiet. Grin fading, Adriana picked up Mr. Gobcup, surprised the doll wasn't falling apart. The clothes were tattered and dirty with age, but the limbs seemed to be intact. Only the center of the body seemed to flop in her hands a bit. As if sensing her thoughts, her dad said, "It went right in the box after you stopped playing with it. Your mom didn't want to see it anymore." Why? She asked in surprise, gazing up at him. Hiccup was staring up at the ceiling, his head leaning against the wall. Already enough scars to look at. Adriana looked at the white scars on his neck. They were a testament to how much he was willing to put on the line to keep her and her brother out of Dager's hands. To keep Burke out of his clutches. She gently lifted the doll's shirt up to see an old dried patch of blood, brown with age. The hole went straight down the center of its chest cavity. He almost killed you. Hiccup nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing. He hurt you. Adriana frowned. He couldn't have wanted Burke so badly. Why did he want to fight to the death? Just, why? She didn't know why she'd asked, she'd never really thought about it before. She'd heard Dager's rivalry with her father had spanned decades, since they were children. Why did it have to end so bloody and ruthlessly? Her dad looked at her with a serious expression. He couldn't beat me. So he figured out the only way to hurt me was to take my family. Adriana's blood ran cold. That's why he kidnapped your mom, Hiccup exhaled. When she was pregnant with you and Finn. She was going into labor when they took her. He kept her locked up in a jail cell and wouldn't send in a healer. That's why you were both born on an uncharted speck of land in the middle of Berserker territory. Adriana frowned. What would he have done if we'd been born in the jail? I don't want to think about it. She frowned, placing the doll back into the box with gentle hands. Well, good riddance. At least he didn't have any heirs. Sven has filled the role nicely, Hiccup replied. Why not keep the territory after Dager died? Adriana asked curiously. He merely shrugged. I got what I wanted. I didn't need anything else. Viking tradition might call to divide and conquer, but I couldn't care less. Sacrificing a lot of power just for the two of us. Her dad scowled suddenly, as if he'd tasted something bitter. Adriana would have stepped back if she was standing. What? I don't. Hiccup sighed. I don't care about my position. Or power. I only ever cared about my wife, my kids, and my dragon. I care about our people and their safety. But I don't care about the position of being chief. I don't care if I have lands or gold or... Hiccup waved his hands around in frustration. You name it. I don't care. Yeah, that's what makes you such a good chief. Adriana said. Her dad breathed a small laugh. To the rest of the world, it makes me weak. A sliver of frustration eased into her voice. They're stupid. Hiccup laughed. I agree. That's why I fought so hard to stop Finn from becoming that kind of chief. One like Dager. Adriana blinked, surprised at the question. She'd never once compared her brother to Dager, but, well, he had been a tyrant once too. Somehow, I doubt Finn would ever have been so ruthless. Or vindictive. Hiccup shook his head. But I didn't want to risk it. I don't know. Hiccup raised an eyebrow. No, like. Adriana shrugged. He's not like that anymore, but he's still scary when he's mad. He hasn't looked at me since we came home from. Addie. Can you blame him? Adriana sighed in frustration. No. But he doesn't have to hate me. Finn doesn't hate you. He's just. Hiccup shook his head. Confused, afraid. Boys don't understand girls anyway. Put him in this position and he's going to be freaked out. Has Eric even come over the last few days? She frowned. I thought you wanted him to stay away. Hiccup winced. We talked earlier. We're not angry with each other anymore, but. I don't know, Addie. I can't trust anyone with you right now. Adriana felt indignation rise in her chest. He wouldn't hurt me. The idea is ridiculous, you don't have to make him stay away like he's the bad guy. That's not the point, Addie Hiccup said. I know he wouldn't. Call me an overprotective, territorial male all you want, but I'm not having anybody in this house right now. For you, for your mom, Finn, heck, for my own sake. We need space right now. Let's take advantage of it while we can. Before I pop like a balloon. Well, let's be realistic, Hiccup smiled. I can't forbid all social activities from now till February. Gods, I'm going to be monstrous. Hiccup snickered, gathering some of the papers and mementos into a pile and placing them back in the box. Adriana pursed her lips, heart pounding. She had to say it, at least for his sake. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Hiccup's movement slowed before quietly replying. It's all right. Don't lie, Adriana said firmly. It's not all right. I should have told you right from the start. The second he wanted more, I should have told you. He carefully placed the top back on the box and pushed it aside. He folded his hands in his lap for a moment, seemingly gathering his thoughts. Addie finally, he met her eyes. A matching set of green. You know I love you, right? Adriana nodded. No matter what. Yes, she whispered, throat tightening. Then it doesn't matter. He whispered back, leaning forward and pulling her into a hug. Young or old, sick or healthy, baby or not, it doesn't matter. I love you, and I'm not going anywhere. Adriana sniffed and buried her face into his shoulder, hugging him around his chest tightly. Thank you. Don't thank me. Hiccup pressed a kiss to her temple. That's just being a parent. And for once, to her ears, it didn't sound at all like an obligation. Finn was ticked. The stitches in his left arm itched like crazy. The great hole was stuffy as heck. The parents sitting at the table in front of him couldn't keep their kids under control. Brandine raped his sister. She was pregnant. And they were about to tell the whole village. He wanted to hide behind a pillar away from probing eyes. People continuously looked at him as his dad conversed quietly with the council nearby. Adriana sat beside Eric on a bench by the head fire pit, looking a bit queasy but keeping her expression calm. Eric whispered something to her and she nodded thinly. Finn bit back a huff. What he wouldn't give to hide in the woods all day. And because he was stupid and cut his wrist, he couldn't even burn as much energy as he usually could. Or he could go back to the healers and Inga could redo his stitches. That wouldn't be too obvious, would it? He was a mixed bag of emotions and he knew it was obvious to those who knew him best. His current scowl was probably a good telltale sign. His friends hadn't spoken to him much the last few days, not since he'd returned from Rune with a gruff attitude worthy of Stoic the Vast. The guys had asked to see his battle injuries, but he'd merely cut them off with a snapped reply of the blood isn't mine and stomped away. He was being a jerk and he knew it. But stress was too high right now. He was close to snapping and he wasn't sure how much longer he could hold out. Hiccup and the council finally broke ranks and calmly walked to the front of the crowd. The murmuring died down almost instantaneously, people curious to know what was going on with their chief and his family this time. Most people already had an idea of what had happened because of the rumor. They still hadn't figured out who'd started it. Finn almost didn't care. Thank you for coming, Hiccup began, folding his hands behind his back. I promise to keep this brief, since we all have things we need to attend to today. He paused, looking toward Astrid for encouragement. A hint of fear flashed across his face for a split second before it disappeared. There is no easy way for me to say this. I'm sorry that your children needed to be present, but there are things I need to discuss with you. I don't want any adult left out. His dad took a deep breath, staring down at his prosthetic for a moment. My daughter was raped by Brandine Anderson. Gasps exploded across the room, eyes whipping to Hiccup, to Astrid, to Adriana who stared at the table, to Finn who kept his eyes locked on his father. He ignored the chatter, the shock, his friends' open stares as they tried to catch his eye. He clenched his jaw and kept his eyes on his dad. I want to take this moment to ease any doubting individuals out there, Hiccup said strongly. Erik Larson did not touch my daughter. Period. I don't want to hear another word about it. Finn glanced at Erik in time to see him reach over and take Adriana's hand subtly under the table. His blood boiled and he looked away. The nerve. The nerve. A hand waved in the corner of his eye. He looked over to see Inga staring at him. She raised a hand in front of her as if to inhale, and moved it down slowly. Breathe. He closed his eyes and did as he was told. He couldn't lose it in here. Not right now. When he could breathe without shaking, Finn opened his eyes and focused again on his father's words. Not sure where Brandine went, but I'm sending warrants out to our allied clans for his arrest. If he so much as sets foot on their islands, they'll bring him here and he'll be hanged for his crimes. Murmurs broke out across the hall once again. Finn gulped, suddenly feeling some of his father's fear. They hadn't even heard the worst of it yet. As if on cue, Hiccup said, "That's not all." Everyone went quiet, waiting to hear what he might say. "Half of the rumor is true," he said, eyes moving across the crowd. "She is pregnant." Again, people gasped. A few women shrieked, as if it pained them to hear the words. Finn's eyes darted to his sister, whose gaze was still locked on the table. Her shoulders were stiff, the knuckles of her fingers white in Erik's grip. Suddenly, a man yelled from the back, "How do we know you're not just covering for Erik?" Finn whirled in the man's direction, ready to track him down and knock his teeth out. Gobber stood next to him and grabbed his arm before he could take a step. Before Hiccup could reply, Adriana's voice erupted across the room, "Erik would never touch me." The room went silent. Nobody had heard her speak to anyone in such a voice. Finn turned to see her glaring at people left and right. "You people don't have to believe me. But it's true. Brandine was not the man he claimed to be." The man snorted in his seat. "For all we know, you could be wrong about Erik too." A few dozen people whirled in their seats in anger, ready to defend the Larson boy. Finn was slightly amazed at how many people were willing to go to blows over the teenager who they'd been gossiping about just yesterday. Cliff looked about ready to launch out of his seat. Hiccup's voice carried across the room over the din, "Joel, I would tread very carefully if I were you." "Or what, Chief?" Joel, a tall, wiry man with long blonde hair stood. "You can't protect everyone." Toothless growled in his spot next to Hiccup, setting some teeth on edge. "I thought that would have been obvious." Hiccup replied coolly. Finn saw the calculating glare and knew Joel was toast. He almost wished he had a bowl of popcorn to enjoy the coming spectacle. Erik broke his silence. "If you think for 1 second I would be best friends with someone for over a decade and then suddenly turn on her and hurt like that, you're an idiot. Wouldn't be the first time it's happened, kid." "True, but I'm not the kind of pig that sleeps with the barkeep." Gasps erupted around the room, even a few snickers. Finn had to fight the smirk coming to his face at Joel's expression. The 25-year-old was typically seen hanging out with Kale, constantly flirting with the patrons of the local tavern, but he'd always had a sweet spot for Donna. "The barkeep has a name, Punk." "So do I," Erik mused, looking at his fingertips casually. "You want respect for the girl you care about? Then respect mine." Finn stiffened. Joel's appreciative look made Erik's ears burn. "If all this is true, then you're jumping into the ring pretty soon after the last guy." "Enough." Hiccup snapped. Finn swallowed his ire. He was inclined to agree with Joel. "The point is that I don't want to hear this ridiculous and completely unfounded rumor anymore. I don't know where it started, who spread it. I don't care. It's false. And it sullies both Eric's and Adriana's good names. Good name. Joel erupted again. He was making out with your little princess not a month ago. Voices of agreement echoed through the room. You people are ridiculous. Hiccup opened his mouth, but Eric beat him. It was a mistake. You're the most nonsensical kid I've ever met. Using big words now. 1 minute you're kissing her, then avoiding her, then saying you care about her, but then you say it's a mistake. You're a joke. Joel waved his arms about, almost trying to rile up the crowd. Finn felt his patience wearing thinner and thinner by the second. The problem was, he wasn't sure which side he'd be arguing on. It was a mistake. Adriana spoke up, standing up for the first time. We're human. We all make mistakes. But trusting Eric, she paused for a moment, meeting his eye. That's not one of them. Finn nearly rolled his eyes with the crowd. Joel scoffed. Please, spare me your romantic love story. You and your precious lover will trash people who know who they are and what they want, yet all you've caused this village is drama since the day you were born. Finn watched his dad surge forward. Either Joel didn't see him coming or he didn't care. Your little rape baby is going to be nothing but a menace to this village because it will have a rapist for a father and a whining little slut for AM. The punch Hiccup delivered to Joel's face echoed across the room. Finn was pretty sure he saw teeth fly. Joel hadn't been on the ground for more than a second before the chief hauled him up by the shirt collar and slammed him over the edge of the fire pit. Even Finn's eyes widened. If I hear my daughter or grandchild referred to in that way ever again, Hiccup seethed. I won't miss the fire pit. Hiccup pulled the man up and shoved him back into his seat with a slam. Wiping blood from his mouth, Joel glared at the chief's back as he stalked away. Let me make myself crystal clear, Hiccup said, falling back into a scarily calm voice. The rumor ends now. If you want to take it up with me privately, fine. We can talk. But I will not tolerate any individual being accused of something they did not do. If I'm unavailable, you may take it up with any individual on the council. They will be willing to answer any of your questions or ease any concerns that you might have. Finn didn't know how he did it. How could his dad shift from rage to calm and collected in a span of seconds? He wished he could bury his anger that easily. I think that is all for now. Hiccup said calmly. Do not bother my daughter for details. She needs space right now and I would ask that you respect her privacy. You're dismissed. It took a few seconds to register the dismissal before everyone steadily got to their feet. Children avoided even looking at the chief out of fear. Finn crossed his arms and leaned back against the pillar, finally allowing himself to exhale. Gobber finally hobbled away to talk to Hiccup. Adriana slowly sat back down beside Eric, who silently reached for her hand once again. She accepted it with a small smile. Finn looked away. He couldn't help but agree with some of Joel's comments. They were ridiculous and sappy and frustrating. All of this drama could have been prevented if Eric had just backed off. Now he had the gall to touch her, to think he had any right. He turned and walked away, pushing past Inga and Cliff and whoever else wanted to talk to him. He needed air and space, maybe an open sky or an uninhabited island where he could scream his frustrations without someone watching. Ducking through the crowd, Finn took a hard left along the walls and stood in the shadows. He gritted his teeth at all the conversation he could hear as people walked down the stairs back toward the village. Mommy. Yes. Is the chief's daughter gonna have a baby? Yes, honey. Finn closed his eyes and looked toward the roof, blocking out all sound. For once in his life, he wished he could evaporate. Or go deaf so he didn't have to hear it anymore. Didn't have to deal with this anymore. He wished. His heart clanged in his chest. He wished Binnen was here. When the number of people exiting the hall lowered and Eric and Adriana emerged, still holding hands, Finn snapped. Neither of them saw him coming until Finn shoved Eric away and rammed him into the stone wall. Adriana gasped. Finn. Don't. Touch. Her. He growled into the other boy's face, feeling his skin flush. Eric's eyes were wide. Finn. Don't just shut up. Don't touch her. Period. I don't want to hear it. Finn yelled. Don't touch my sister. Finn. Adriana cried, pulling at his arm. He didn't even know why he was feeling so desperate, but everything felt like an attack. He was still furious with her too, so why did he even care what she did anymore? If she wanted to act like a victim and then let the next boy sidle right in and get comfortable because she needed support and a boy to make her life better, then why did he even care? Eric held up his hands calmly. Okay. Then, Hiccup and Astrid walked out. The chief nearly balked. Finn. What let him go? He wished he could strangle him. Instead, he released Eric and stepped back once. Eric calmly straightened his shirt. Adriana inhaled sharply, sounding like she was trying not to cry. Hiccup sighed and stepped forward. Finn. Don't talk to me in that voice, Finn growled. Like I'm the bad guy. Nobody is saying that, Finn. Astrid said placatingly. But you need to. What? Sit here and do nothing like the rest of you. Finn shouted. Hiccup winced, peering down the stairs at the few people still retreating. Finn, keep your voice down. Or what? You'll throw me in the fire pit too. His dad was in his face a second later. Don't you dare give me that tone. We are not doing this. We need to be on the same page here. No, Finn shook his head. We're never on the same page. Except these two. I agree with half of what Joel said. Adriana's face went slack. Which part? The part where you two have this petty little romance going on in the midst of all this garbage that's happened. Finn growled. You two need to have a serious reality check because you're pregnant. And while we're trying to tell the village what the heck is going on, that it's not him who put the kid there, you two still have the gall to hold hands through the whole thing. Who the heck is going to believe you? Eric pursed his lips. Finn knew he didn't need to be so angry, but he knew he was right. I don't want to be rude, but that's not any of your business, Eric said calmly. No, I don't see why any of this is your business. Finn snapped. People accused me, Eric started. He raped my sister, Eric. Finn's voice nearly cracked. Everyone went stiff, almost like they were shocked that he'd even said it. That he was showing emotion about it. Like they were surprised he even cared. Finn stepped back, looking at all of them in turn, hurt and angry. Am I not allowed to say or do anything here? Hiccup held out his hands placatingly. Finn, we have to handle this delicately. Excuse me if I get a little overprotective of any guy touching her. I thought you'd appreciate that. He glared at his dad. I do, Finn. Hiccup said. But Eric isn't the bad guy. Yeah, the bad guy is walking free out there, potentially doing this. He jerked a hand at Adriana, who flinched. 2 other girls out there. But you don't care about them, do you? Finn. Because it's not her. Finn nearly shouted. Screw anybody else, because she's the only one who's important. Finn, come on, that's not true. Hiccup sighed. Then explain to me why this. Finn gestured to Eric and Finn, standing shoulder to shoulder. Is in any way okay after all this? Friendly support isn't a bad thing. Eric said. He rolled his eyes. You and I both know that there's more to this than friendly support. Whatever you want to tell yourself, Finn. All right, enough, Hiccup said, pushing between them. I get you're upset, but we need to keep a level head. Finn shook his head. Yeah, level-headedness is what's going to solve all these issues. For the record, he turned to his sister. Maybe I'm getting all up in your business because I'm trying to protect you. I don't need you to protect me, Finn. Adriana said, an edge to her voice. Especially not from Eric. Or do I need to convince you along with the rest of the village that he'd never hurt me? Finn narrowed his eyes. He has hurt you. Lots of times. And I forgave him. His sister growled. Eric had him pinned with a teal glare. Stop acting like you're so much better. I'm not. Finn shouted. Maybe I'm sick of being useless around here. Okay, Astrid said, trying to get between them. Stop it. Hiccup pushed him back before either him or sister could say another word. Finn, please. Finn panted angrily, staring him down. I cannot do this right now, Finn. No, Finn wasn't ashamed that his eyes burned. Where it concerns me, you never can. Turning away he marched toward the woods and didn't look back, not even when they called his name. Chapter 17, Words of Assurance. Chapter text. That night Finn lay in his bed, face smashed against his pillow. He twisted his Fortis necklace in his fingers, dangling over the edge of the bed, thoughts swirling in his head. Another sleepless night loomed. Strong. He wasn't strong, he was confused and angry and being a jerk. He didn't know how to be strong in a situation like this. Binnen would have assessed the situation and known how to deal with everything happening. Better yet, he would have had the exact words to say for every person. If Binnen were here, he wouldn't feel so lost and confused. He heard the mismatched footsteps before his bedroom door opened. He looked over his shoulder to see his father's matching frown. Get your boots on. Even though his curiosity piqued, Finn sighed and rolled over. Where are we going? His dad threw his flight mask, which he caught midair. For a flight. Without another word, Hiccup walked out and down the stairs. Finn sat up, running a hand through his hair. As he bent over to pull his boots on and put his necklace back on, the things he'd said earlier that day ran through his mind once again. He didn't think he was wrong, no, he still believed Eric and Adriana needed to take things slowly than they were. She hadn't been home for a full week yet and they were already trying to start a relationship when she was pregnant. Did Eric realize that she was about to be single mom? Did she even realize that? Maybe it was inevitable, he thought as he clomped down the stairs, ignoring his mom and sister sitting in the living room. It wasn't that he didn't want Eric and Adriana together. He'd always had a feeling about them, Eric's lifelong crushing aside. It was one of those things that everyone had always known. He almost envied them for it. But not now. They had to be losing their minds if they really thought now was the time to start a relationship. Finn found his dad inside the barn, saddling Toothless. Wordlessly, he saddled Zap and strapped a small pack of supplies to the straps. A few minutes later he was ready. Hiccup was already leading Toothless outside and getting into the saddle. You never said where exactly we're going. Finn slid into his own saddle, Zap wiggling in anticipation beneath him. He scratched the scales behind her ears to placate her anxiety. His dad shook his head. Anywhere but here for a while. I'm stressed, you're stressed. Let's just get out of here for a bit. Finn shrugged, unsure if he'd feel any better after taking a mere flight across the darkening skies. But he nudged Zap into position and they took off together. Zap pumped her wings harder to keep up with the night fury. The wind ruffled his hair, the chill bit his skin. Finn was glad he'd pulled on a jacket before leaving. The sun was close to setting, splashing a montage of colors across the skies and reflecting off the waves. They ducked around puffy clouds that passed. Finn looked over at Hiccup, whose brow was pinched, the frown still on his face. He looked away, feeling guilty for the things he'd said. He ran through all the reasons in his head why, logically, he was right. He knew he was right. So why did he feel so bad when his dad gave the kicked puppy look? Burke had long since disappeared on the horizon when Finn finally gathered enough gumption to speak. Look, I'm sorry I'm making things more difficult for you. You're stressed enough as it is, I get it, Finn said with a sigh. But I can't ignore how I feel about things. Hiccup winced. Not now, Finn. Finn bit back a huff. You dragged me out here and you don't want to talk, AB, what are you doing? His dad had begun unstrapping his harnesses and kneeled on top of Toothless' back. The night fury rumbled in sudden excitement, keeping his wings steady. Zap looked on in surprise, a rumbling ah coming from her throat. Toothless gave her a look that said, watch and learn, cub. Hiccup merely replied, stress relief. Then he dove off of Toothless head first. Dad. Finn watched in shock as his dad plummeted toward the waves 1,000 feet below. A second later, Toothless dove after him, roaring for all the world to hear. Zap, come on. The shockjaw crowed and pulled into a dive. They weren't going nearly fast enough to catch either man or dragon if anything went wrong. The wind tore his hair back against his scalp, the cold freezing his fingertips. His dad was still diving, arms at his sides, Toothless next to him in the same alignment. When the water loomed and Finn began to feel panic rise in his throat, Hiccup twisted into his saddle, locked in and snapped into position. Toothless roared with exhilaration as the wind caught his wings and they blasted across the ocean waves, leaving the kids behind. Whoa! Finn stared after them with wide eyes, looking down at the waves merely 200 feet below. The stories don't exaggerate. Zap rumbled in agreement, pumping her wings harder to catch up. At long last Toothless slowed and flew beside them. Finn stared at his dad, eyes still wide. Hiccup laughed. All right, say it. That was so stupid and crazy and freaking amazing. His dad laughed again. Finn smiled too. How'd you do that? Years of practice. Right, bud. Hiccup scratched his dragon's scales beneath the ear plates. The chief sighed. We don't get to do that very much anymore. Finn could almost feel the longing of freedom coming off the pair. He'd heard stories of their harrowing adventures and crazy flying his entire life. He'd seen his dad and dragon fly for his entire life. But he'd never really seen them in action. Not many of his generation had really seen just what they could really do. A streak of competition roared through his veins, and he smirked. I don't know, Zap. All words, no show all these years. He felt 4 glowing green eyes lock on him and he shrugged. They probably couldn't do many fancy tricks anymore. He smirked at his dad, whose eyes were narrowed. Wouldn't want to break anything with those old bones. Toothless snorted, pumping his wings in irritation. A slow, daring smile spread across Hiccup's face. We'll leave you in a cloud of dust, boy. So much chit-chat. Then let's go. Hiccup snapped into position and smirked. Let's show them how it's done, Toothless. The Night Fury and Zap roared as they dove, hurtling toward the ocean. Zap waited for the perfect moment to catch the updraft before hurtling forward across the skies, Toothless and Hiccup on their tails. They lost track of time, zipping between the clouds, dive-bombing the waves, tackling each other in the air. Finn didn't know how long it had been before they landed, but the sun had already set when they did. The older rider and dragon led the way to a random hilltop high above the village, overlooking the ocean and rolling hills. Finn slid off Zap's saddle and flopped onto the grass, his knees nearly buckling. He'd be sore tomorrow, but he didn't care. He hadn't had that much fun in a long time. Toothless and Hiccup joined him on the grass. Zap stretched her wings before curling into a ball on the grass to take a nap. Within minutes she was snoring. Apparently all that hard flying had worn the younger dragon out. His dad stretched an arm across his chest, pulling his elbow with a wince. I might be getting too old for those kinds of antics. Finn snorted. That's sad. Honestly, it is. Hiccup sighed. We used to pull crazier stunts for hours straight, every day. I can see the appeal. Domesticism stinks. Hiccup frowned. Well, no. It just came to a point where I had to decide what I wanted to do with my life. I needed to come to terms with my responsibilities, and I knew I wanted to marry your mom. He shrugged, folding his hands behind his head and laying back against the grass. It turned out all right. It was Finn's turn to frown. He hated to be a killjoy, but he couldn't help but say, not all of it. A sigh. I know. His thoughts turned to his sister once again, and everything he'd said to her and Eric earlier. He reflected on the last few weeks, before she'd run away, how weird she'd been acting. Little did he know that she was pregnant all that time. So much makes sense now, Finn murmured. Why she was so angry and burned everything he'd given her. She wasn't just mad that he'd cheated on her. I know. Why even? Finn didn't finish. He didn't want to voice his thoughts. But it didn't make sense. Why did Brandine even feel the need to press Adriana into anything if he'd been getting some on the side with Dana anyway? Some people are just that perverted, Finn. It doesn't make sense. That's just how it is. What are we going to do about him? Hiccup was silent for nearly a minute. Toothless lifted his head and placed it on his torso, effectively forbidding him from moving anytime soon. The chief rubbed his dragon's nose absently. Right now, nothing. We'll see if he shows up anywhere. Indignation twisted in Finn's belly. As patiently as he could, he replied, that's stupid and you know it. I have to focus on your sister right now. I don't have time to go gallivanting around the archipelago looking for him. But I'm well aware of what could happen, Finn. He can't hide forever. One day he'll show up somewhere, and if we're lucky, he'll get caught and they'll hold him so we can properly punish him. But your sister needs us here. Finn scoffed at the stars. She doesn't need me. His dad was quiet. You two need each other more than you'd like to admit. She doesn't trust me. Do you trust her? Hiccup asked, facing him. Finn kept his eyes on the sky. Did he trust his sister? He knew she'd keep any secrets for him. She'd kept a tight lid on his past, no matter how many times he'd made her angry. She easily could have spread all his secrets. Yet she never had. But did he trust her? I don't know what she could do for me if I needed her to. We haven't really had that kind of situation before. She admires you, Hiccup said. She stands up for you when you're not around. Finn frowned. What do you mean? As hard as you've worked to regain the favor of the villagers, there are still a few who are skeptical. I've seen her tell people to shut up and give you a chance. Really? When was this? A while ago. A good few months after things started turning around. Hiccup said. They sat in silence for a few minutes, each pondering the same girl and her recent troubles. Finn found himself scowling when his dad spoke again. I understand you want to go after Brandine. Believe me, I do too. If ever see him on Burke again. His dad's voice hardened for a second. He wouldn't be leaving. But I can't put revenge first. She needs me, and I can't abandon her. She needs all of us, all of our support. You keep saying that, Finn sighed. I don't know what exactly you want me to do or say. Do you want me to apologize for how I feel? I can't help that I feel differently about all of this than you guys do. Hiccup thought for a minute. Imagine if she went out of her way to badmouth you no matter how hard you were trying to do better. You'd want her to be on your side, wouldn't you? Finn huffed, sitting up. That's different. His dad also sat up, pushing Toothless' head off his chest. Why is it different? Because I was the one who did something stupid. Finn growled, memories resurfacing. A lot of stupid things. I was the one who ripped the village apart. I was the one who nearly got Ava and Eric killed. By all rights, she should have been ripping me a new one in front of everyone. But she didn't. Hiccup said patiently. All of that, and she still chose to forgive you. I'm not. Finn stood, feeling the sudden need to pace. This isn't a situation of forgiveness. I'm not mad at her for what happened. Yes you are, Finn. Okay. I'm beyond ticked that she went to ruin. Finn threw an arm in the island's general direction. She took off without telling somebody, could have drowned at sea, could have been mistreated by those Runian pigs, could have gotten Lily killed. So yeah, you're right, I guess I am pretty mad about all of that. What about the rest of it? Hiccup asked from the grass patiently. His green eyes nearly glowed in the dark. Finn crossed his arms with a huff. Which part? All of it. I don't know, Dad. Finn huffed, facing the cliff face. The familiar anger burned in his chest. I'm not mad that she couldn't stop him. Out of all the guys, only Brandine could match me in a fight. He swallowed hard at the thought. Hiccup sighed. I just have a hard time believing that you're only angry because she took off. Finn whipped around. She didn't tell anybody. Didn't tell anybody what? That's she's freaking pregnant, Dad. Finn shouted, waking the dragons from their slumbers. They growled and rolled over, but Finn ignored them. You know this, so why are you? Because I wanted to hear you say it. Finn frowned, realizing his dad's train of thought. His dad had been trying to get to the root of his anger this whole time. Even now he was discovering what exactly that was. A girl can't help that, Finn. He turned away, his anger bubbling. His dad stayed quiet, seemingly waiting for him to speak. Finally he seemed to scramble his thoughts into something coherent. It would have been one thing if he'd done whatever, took off, and left us to pick up the pieces. That's not anything new, and I don't care about Dee. Give her time to heal and come back from it, and we could all move on. Finn said, finally turning back to his dad. But we can't because we're going to be reminded of it every day. Hiccup finally made to stand. Finn. No, you know it's true. Finn stepped back. You guys want her to keep this thing? Hiccup's gaze sharpened. It's a child, Finn. Exactly. Finn gasped, surprised at the horror in his tone. It's not going to go away. She's going to be reminded of what happened every day, and worse, it will remind us of what we failed to stop. No, Hiccup shook his head. I think it will do just the opposite. You actually want her to live with this for the rest of her life? Finn demanded. She's not alone, all of us can help her. What if this isn't what she needs? Finn asked. We both know that she does better with traumatizing experiences when the triggers aren't there. Bring in the trigger, and she's known to fall apart. She doesn't fall apart like that anymore, Finn. I do. Finn insisted. When I saw Javan on Rune, all I could see were slave traders. I know. Hiccup said gently. But she's older and stronger now. You were terrified to leave the house when you came home last year. She was willing to sit in the great hall in front of the entire village and listen as I told everyone what happened to her. And not only that, she stood up and told them the truth herself. His dad shook his head in slight amazement. Honestly, Finn, I've never seen that from her. So she had guts for 20 minutes, Finn frowned. That doesn't mean she should raise the thing that Brandine forced on her. Stop calling it that. It's a person. Finn sighed. Hiccup crossed his arms, exhaling through his nose. I understand why you feel this way, Finn. It's hard and it's scary. But again, we have to do what's best for her. I don't think keeping it is what's best for her. And while I value your opinion, Hiccup said calmly, you're not the one who's making the final call. And you are. Finn dared. No, Hiccup said. Even though I'm her father and I want what is best for her, which I firmly believe is keeping the child. I don't want to force anything on her. It would kill me if she didn't want to keep it. But I think she does. Did she tell you this herself? Not in so many words. Hiccup said, kicking a pebble out from under his prosthetic. I know she's afraid and unsure, but I see the way she looks down at herself. There's more to that look than fear, Finn. Finn huffed, looking away. I just... What? I don't know what to do or where I stand in all of this. I feel... He hated the word, knew how his dad felt about it, but he said it anyway, useless. Hiccup fought the wince. You're not useless, Finn. You're anything but that. Well, I can't just agree to this. I'm not asking you to. I want you to be on the same page as the family, Finn, but I can't force you to change your mind. I don't want you to fight with her, I want you to respect her and her decisions. I want you to give Eric some patience and space, because he's going through a ton right now. You certainly have some deep dark secrets that you don't want people to know about. Finn winced, Rain's beautiful face flashing in his mind's eye. Eric was rumored to have caused all this. He's only trying to stand by her side and give her support, not start anything prematurely. Guilt welled in his chest, he needed to apologize to his friend, at least for attacking him. That much was true. As for Brandine, Hiccup rested a hand on his shoulder, straightening his son's spine so they saw eye to eye. You're a warrior by nature, Finn. You protect the people you care about. As a father and chief, I can't do anything about him right now. But there's going to come a day that we will see Brandine again. And when that day comes, his dad's eyes nearly glowed in the darkness. I won't hold you back. A promise. One day, Finn would get the chance to avenge what that man had stolen from his smart, beautiful sister. And despite his reservations on the child, Finn felt his resolve tighten. One day, he and Brandine would go blade to blade. He didn't know when, but someday, Brandine would pay for everything he'd put his sister through. He'd pay for hurting her physically, emotionally, for cheating on her, for everything. For once, fearless Finn was not afraid. And he would not hold back. The next days were a blur. Adriana took frequent walks in the woods behind her house to get some fresh air. Occasionally she'd walk to the village to visit the library or poke her head into the leather shop to say hi to the boys. They'd greet her cheerfully. Horst gave her a thin leather bracelet with colorful beads on it yesterday, saying he had no use of it. The kind gesture made her smile, and she had yet to take it off. Some individuals still gave her the stink eye as she walked the streets, but the support was larger. She still felt uncomfortable, being single and pregnant and the chief's daughter, but in the end, she was glad she'd told everyone the truth. She was tired of hiding. She didn't want to live the next year of her life indoors. Her house, and Eric and Cliff's, were overflowing with gifts of apology. The thing about Vikings, they were stubborn and brash and bullheaded most of the time. But when they found themselves in the wrong and were willing to admit it, they apologized profusely with gifts. Food, animals, weapons, empty scrolls and quills, inkwells, dragon riding gear, anything you could think of, the Haddock's home now overflowed. Cliff and Eric's small house fared no better. She'd knocked on the door the evening before to see if they wanted to take a walk with her, and she'd heard Cliff yelp something about protecting his precious bounty from strays. Eric had socked him in the head at the admission. Literally, he'd thrown a dirty sock at the other boy. "What's this about strays and your precious bounty?" Cliff was buried up to his chin in snacks as he lounged on the couch. "Odd, your babbling buffoon of a brother came by the other night and ate half my snacks." The outrage. Adriana slid into a chair, accepting a warm mug of cider from Eric. She took a sip and hummed happily. They'd been given so many apples that apparently the Larson boy had taken to making all sorts of apple treats. Cider brewed over the fire, muffins and strudels cooled on the countertop, and the distinct smell of apple pie wafted from the stone oven. She'd forgotten that Eric had such an affinity for baking. "Why did Finn come to steal your bounty?" Cliff shoved a handful of nuts, raisins and chocolate pieces into his mouth. He wanted to say sorry for being a butthead. Adriana smirked. He'd never stop apologizing. "Hey now," Eric said from the kitchen area. "He's not all bad. HMPH. Have you talked to him?" "Nope," Adriana said, twisting her mug in her hands. "He hasn't said a thing to me since the Great Hall meeting." "Nothing?" Cliff asked, missing his mouth and dropping his mixture all over the couch. "Ah. My bounty." "Nothing." "Whatever." Eric leaned against the countertop, rearranging his muffins to near perfection. Because only Eric would rearrange muffins to make them look just right. Perhaps he was like his mother a little bit after all. Adriana loved his little idiosyncrasies that made him who he was. To him. HM. Adriana blinked. Eric smiled as he repeated himself. "I said you should talk to him." She frowned. "He'll come to me when he's ready." "That's Finn for you." "Sure, he did that for us," Eric said, putting a square of strudel on a plate and walking it over to her. The step thump of his prosthetic nearly matched the gait of her father's. "But maybe he's afraid to broach the subject with you." Adriana accepted the snack and raised a brow. "Hello, this is Fearless Finn we're talking about." "Fierce Finesse no ways fierce," Cliff said around a giant mouthful of muffin. She gaped at him. "Do you ever stop eating?" "I'm keeping my weight up." "You've been eating all day and haven't gained an ounce." "Shut up, Larson." Adriana snickered. While Cliff nearly dwarfed her in height, his metabolism remained high. Which meant that, unlike Finn, who could put on muscle at every meal and work out, Cliff remained thin and wiry. He'd continued to grow inch by inch, but he still couldn't put on weight. Or grow a mustache, as it turned out. He'd informed them the other day that he'd been trying for a few years now. Eric, though. Adriana's eyes slid to her friend as he continued cutting the strudel. He was fairly average height, average weight, average looks. She was completely fine with this, however, she wasn't complaining. Most blondes couldn't grow beards because one couldn't really see it anyway. Eric's facial hair came in a tad darker than the rest, but he still kept his face clean shaven most of the time. She didn't fail to notice the light shadow on the underside of his chin. His wavy blonde hair curled at the edges with the summer humidity. She almost wondered what it would look like longer. But no, she liked him just the way he was. She did wonder, however, what would happen if he consistently worked out like Finn did. She somehow doubted that he'd change extensively. He certainly wouldn't look like her brother in terms of muscle. But still, the idea sent butterflies bursting through her stomach. "You all right over there?" Eric suddenly asked. Adriana shook herself and smiled, shoving the rest of the strudel into her mouth. He'd caught her staring at him. Yup. Unaware of what it did to her, Eric smirked and held out a muffin. "Want one?" "Cider, strudel, muffins. Are you trying to make me fat? Even if I was, you'd still be pretty." Cliff mimicked a gag over the side of the couch. Adriana blushed, but still threw her napkin at Cliff. "Shut up, Smedley. If you guys are about to get lovey-dovey, I'm going to retreat to Taryn's house." "No." Cliff whipped around and threw his bag of nuts and chocolates at Eric, who ducked. The bag exploded across the counter. "Hey. I was gonna say fins. You made a mess. So much care for the bounty, I see," Eric drawled, throwing peanuts and other kinds of nuts across the room. Adriana watched the showering snacks with amusement, feeling extremely relaxed and at home with her boys. If only she could feel this relaxed at home. It wasn't her parents. They'd gone above and beyond the last week to make her feel comfortable and loved. But Finn. He had to be ignoring her. It had nothing to do with the fact that he left for work early and that he came home late. Anytime he'd seen her in the village or the Great Hall the last few days, he legitimately turned the other direction. Almost as if it pained him to see her. She sighed, bending over and picking up a handful of the little snacks. "What exactly is all this?" "We don't know," Eric said, looking at a handful himself. "Cliff calls them trail mix." "Why?" "I dunno. Nuts and chocolate and raisins in a bag of fabulousness. Obviously it's meant for adventures on the trail." "Shut up, Larson." Adriana snickered once again. It was strange to admit to herself, but Eric was openly flirting with her in front of Cliff. Even if he didn't do so in front of anyone else, he was comfortable here at least. She didn't mind it one bit. She liked it, even. But how should she respond? She'd flirted with Brandine once upon a time. In the beginning, and for a better portion of their relationship, he'd been fun and sarcastic and witty. Only as time went on had things started to go downhill, as was typical for some relationships. It wasn't out of the question for people to break up. But considering everything that had happened, they were far from typical. Every move of his had become calculating, almost like he'd had a plan. Long before he'd become violent, it felt like he always had some plan for the day. There was less spontaneous adventure, there was prioritized activities. Looking back on it, their dates had grown to be kind of dull. She'd missed Eric and Cliff's random bouts of fun. One day she'd see them fishing, the next they'd be sitting at home, lying on the couches upside down as they tried to catch jelly beans in the air. Another day she'd see Cliff dragging Eric to the bakery because it was National Cinnamon Roll Day. It didn't matter what day it was or what time, everything they did was positively random. She'd craved that kind of fun. They had a lot of fun memories on the days she could finally participate. It was almost like Brandine had purposely tried to keep her away from them. For every afternoon she spent with them, he'd have 3 dates consecutively planned out. It felt like in the last year, she hadn't really spent enough time with them. It felt like wasted opportunities. She should have dropped Brandine a year ago. Then maybe none of this would have happened. She frowned guiltily and looked down at her stomach. It was still hard to fathom, and she still hadn't experienced any physical changes with her pregnancy, but she felt the attachment. She was going to be a mom. The words had been on her mind long enough now that it felt strange to think otherwise. And besides, she'd ended up back with her boys eventually. Brandine was gone, Cliff was on his hands and knees trying to pick up peanuts with his elbows, Eric's shoulders were shaking at the visual. The gods knew she'd end up back here eventually, right in the middle of controlled chaos. Eric pressed the palms of his hands into his eyes, still laughing as Cliff again told him to shut up, that he needs to focus. Adriana's heart leaped at the dimples clearly visible on Eric's cheeks. Nothing made her happier than seeing him smile like that. It made her want to hold him tight and tell him everything she'd never had the guts to say. Finn's words came back to her and her smile faded. She tilted her empty plate so the crumbs scattered from side to side. She knew he was right to an extent. They couldn't rush things, no matter how much she wished she could. She was pregnant, Eric had been accused of abusing her. The idea still made her blood boil. People really didn't know anything about them. She wished she knew who'd started the rumor so she could teach them a thing or two. But the damage was done. They had a long way to go, in a number of ways. While they needed to keep tabs on how they looked to the village, aka not do anything supremely stupid, she needed to get her life situated at home. She was having a baby in less than 9 months. She couldn't prioritize anything else. Besides, Eric had always held her hand in silent comfort and support, ever since they were little kids. That's the kind of gesture it was in the Great Hall, for the meeting. Finn read into everything. To him, every gesture had a purpose, a specific intent. He was like their mom, every move and word intentional, purposeful. Maybe he was just being overprotective, considering the circumstances. Though he still had no right to full-on attack her friend, when he was only trying to be supportive. No, Finn was crossing a line. His feelings might be in the right place, but he was too aggressive, his opinion too poignant. The last thing she wanted to be around was an aggressive male who couldn't control himself. She's frowning again. Eric sighed, walking around the table. Take the pie out in 10 minutes, Cliffy. Huh. Cliff abruptly sat up from the floor, elbows smashed together. Where are you going? I'm going to walk Annie home. She frowned. I don't want to go home yet. Eric gave her a mischievous look. She narrowed her eyes and pried herself out of the chair, walking towards the door. All right then. Lead on, Mr. Larson. Eric smirked and opened the door, waving her out. Okay, I'll stay here and guard all these tasty treats, then. Don't eat them all. Eric warned before following her outside and closing the door. They heard a muffled response beyond the door before walking away, leaving Cliff to his own devices. Are you sure you want to leave him there by himself? Adriana teased. Eric grinned. Come on, he's fully capable. Yes, capable of eating every dessert in the house. He knows what will happen if he does that. And burning the house down. Okay, Miss Smartypants. Eric waved his hands around. Adriana stuck her tongue out at him, he quickly nudged her with his shoulder, knocking her off course. Rude. Clumsy. Blondie. Eric rolled his eyes. That insult would make more sense if you weren't also blonde. Yeah, but your hair is prettier. He stuck out his lip in a pout, making her giggle. My hair is not pretty. I like it. Your hair is nicer. Please, this thick mane. Adriana pushed it over her shoulder, feeling swish between her shoulder blades. I have half a mind to chop it all off. She felt Eric's eyes on her, so she looked up at him questioningly. His teal gaze was intense, looking at her hair, before slowly meeting her eyes. He'd never looked at her like that before. It was like that look of longing he'd once given her, but deeper, more fervent. Unwaveringly affectionate. Please don't cut it off. Eric finally said, quietly enough so that she almost didn't hear him. Adriana smiled a little. Why? Eric seemed to remember something and looked down. He shoved his hands in his pockets, focusing on the dirt path as they walked. You can tell me, Adriana said, curiosity burning through her. I'm not going to laugh at you. Why don't you want me to cut my hair? She watched him swallow, hard. That's when she realized he was nervous. Really nervous. After a few more steps of silence, she looked away, sure he wasn't going to reply when. Because it's gorgeous. Adriana faced him again, finding him already staring at her. A blush rose to her face and she smiled, looking down at her boots. The honesty in his face made her hands shake. Oh, stop. No, I mean it. Eric said, seemingly regaining some confidence. I've always liked it. She grinned at his slip-up, but didn't comment on it. Was he usually this nervous? The girls, her family, so many people had been telling her for years that he was crazy about her. The idea always surprised her, since they'd been so close for so many years. Was she just now seeing the signs? Unsure what to say, Adriana bit her lip in thought. She didn't want to leave him hanging, so she said, "I love your dimples." Eric breathed a laugh, bringing them to his face. Her heart somersaulted in her chest. "Why? They're like inverted craters on my face when I show a hint of real happiness." "Exactly," Adriana exclaimed, poking his arm. "They're the telltale sign when you're genuinely happy." His smile faltered, making the dimples fade. "I'd used to say that." Adriana reached over and wrapped her hand around his bicep in comfort. "She'd be proud of you." He smiled again, and she didn't fail to notice the way his eyes darted to her hand on his arm. "Thanks, Annie." They walked across the bridge in near silence. A salty sweet scent of ocean spray blew their hair back. Adriana tilted her head back and closed her eyes as she deeply inhaled. Warm summer nights were her favorite part of the season. She opened her eyes to find Eric watching her silently, his eyes on her neck. He blinked and looked away, his face flushing, which only surprised her. Hiding a smile, she decided she'd need to ask Taryn and Helga how often they caught Eric checking her out, if it was even obvious. If it wasn't a common occurrence, then tonight he was being extremely obvious. Finally her house came into view. Eric walked her all the way up to the front door, as per usual. He leaned against one of the porch handrails, looking up at her as she mounted the stairs. He looked like he wanted to say something, but he made no move to speak. Adriana smiled and twisted her hands behind her back. "Do you want to come in, or?" "No, that's okay." He smiled, shaking his head. "I need to get home and get ready for work tomorrow. Make sure we don't get any mice from Cliff's poor snacking habits." "Okay," Adriana said, sheepishly avoiding eye contact. Goodbyes had never been awkward for them, so why were they acting weird? "Thanks for walking me home." "No problem," Eric said softly. He was staring up at her serenely, the nearby torchlight glinting against his eyes, his hair. "I'll see you tomorrow." "Yeah, tomorrow." Adriana nodded. "Okay." Eric straightened and moved toward the ground once more. "Good night, Annie." He made it 2 steps down before Adriana blurted, "Wait." Eric turned to look back up at her. She didn't know why she did it, but suddenly the need was overpowering. She walked forward, gently held the sides of his face, and kissed him. Eric went tense for a second before wrapping a hand around her waist and pulling her closer. Never in the 2 years she'd dated had Adriana ever been kissed like this. Eric gently turned her so her back was to a pole and completely captured her mouth with his. He threaded his fingers through her hair so gently and patiently that her toes curled in her boots. Adriana sighed and pushed her fingers into his hair and down his neck. Eric groaned and kissed her needily, effectively stilling her hands against his skin. She'd never known someone to hold her like this and still give her the space to move away if she wanted to. But she didn't want to. Even with all the bad things that had happened to her, she fervently believed Eric would never hurt her. He would only ever care about her, her well-being, her feelings and emotions, her physical needs. He'd only ever cared this much because honestly. Eric finally slowed and pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. Adriana fought a giddy smile, she could tell he was no better. "I love you, Adriana Haddock." Eric murmured against her lips, looking to all the world like he might start kissing her again. "I love you." Adriana grinned and kissed his nose. "I love you too, Eric Larson." Eric grinned then and kissed her once more, chastely this time. But he soon pulled away and cleared his throat, whether for her benefit or his own, she wasn't sure. "However, as great as all that is." Adriana snickered, dropping her face into his shoulder. She was so giddy, she could hardly think straight. Laughing, Eric bobbed his shoulder so she'd look up at him again. "We should probably discuss all of this." "You just gestured to all of me," Adriana sassed. Eric rolled his eyes. "Seriously?" Adriana nodded. "Seriously?" "Yeah. Do you want to get breakfast tomorrow?" He raised a blonde eyebrow critically. "I work at 8. Blinking innocently, she asked, "So? You never get up before 9:30? Adriana sniffed. "Anything for you, Mr. Larson." "Oh gods, don't call me that." She blinked at his tone, surprised. "Why?" Eric smirked. Because frankly, the way you say it makes me want to kiss you senseless. Adriana swallowed hard at the thought. Perhaps someday then. He grinned, dimples emerging once again. She wanted to kiss them. Anyway, breakfast then. Yes, she nodded firmly. I can always take a nap halfway through the day. Right. Eric gently pushed her hair away from her eyes and kissed her forehead. I have to go now. So soon? Adriana breathed against his mouth. He sighed heavily. You are such a sadist. What? Why? Because you drive me crazy. I didn't even miles per hour. Eric kissed her firmly one more time before finally stepping back and walking down the final steps. I'll see you tomorrow, Annie. Okay. Good night, Eric. Eric gave her one final grin before beginning his walk back to the village. Adriana leaned against the pole he'd pressed her up against, smiling at his back for a good long while. Even after he'd disappeared into the night, she could still feel the ghost of his lips against hers. Somehow she doubted she'd sleep tonight, even if she had decided to get up early. But she meant it. For him, she'd ask her mom to wake her up early. For him, she'd gladly get up every morning if she could see him off to work every day. If it meant seeing teal eyes and a dimpled smile, she'd sacrifice sleep every day. Eventually, when she began to shiver from the chilling air, she decided to go inside. Slipping off her boots inside the door, she heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Finn emerged a second later. He merely raised an eyebrow at her and waltzed into the kitchen. Adriana wanted nothing more than to run straight upstairs to her diary and write down everything that had happened in the last 10 minutes. But Eric had advised her to speak to her brother. They couldn't avoid each other forever, and her child would be Finn's niece or nephew. There was no getting around that fact. She quietly sat down at the table and watched him pour a bowl of milk and cereal. He chugged a better portion of the milk from the container before noticing her raised eyebrow stare. Don't judge. I'm not judging. I do that with the juice all the time. Thanks for warning me. You just did it with the milk. Milk goes bad in a few days. I'm saving us from wasting. PSH. Adriana shook her head. Finn could talk himself out of any ridiculous thing and still come out on top. Have fun swapping spit. Adriana leveled a glare at him as he replaced the milk and turned back toward his bowl. He shoveled a spoonful in and rolled his eyes. Relax, I'm not going to tattletale. Doesn't mean you had to spy on us. I was walking past the window when you started it. I didn't stick around for the whole show. Relief eased its way into her chest. She was still annoyed, but at least he hadn't watched their entire shared moment. Or worse, burst out the door and beat Eric to a pulp. Adriana steeled herself. He wanted me to talk to you. Finn rolled his eyes. Course he did. He doesn't want us to argue. I'm not arguing. Finn, seriously. I'm not. Adriana huffed, pushing a hand into her thick hair. I'm having a baby in a few months. I want you to be a part of it. Finn shoved his spoon around the bowl, glaring down at it. I never have a say in these things. Do you think I had a say in it? He glowered. I don't want to fight about this. Adriana said firmly. We feel different about a lot of things, but I'm tired of fighting people. I want to be able to figure this out without all the drama. I'm tired of drama. Finn had gone stiff at the counter. She backpedaled. I'm not calling you drama. That's not what I meant. Finn huffed and rubbed at his face. Then let's be a bit more clear then, okay? You and Dad always say things and when I take it the wrong way, you try to say what you really meant. Then forget all of what I just said. Adriana said. Let me start over. At which part, exactly? Finn asked. How far back are we going with this restart? Adriana frowned warily, unsure what was on his mind. How far back do you want to go? I mean, obviously you've been mad at me for a while now. Mad doesn't even begin to describe it. Then describe it for me, Finn. Adriana snapped. Stop beating around the bush and running away from me and just say when you have to say. I want to know why you went to Rune. Adriana winced. It was an ACC. No, you went to port and you left the ship. Why? Finn demanded. She sighed. My map was destroyed. I was hoping that some nice guy would let you buy one and you'd be on your merry way. Finn glared. I know, it was stupid. Stupid doesn't even come close. Finn nearly growled. You know what happens there. You know what happened to me there. I know. Then what would possess you? Maybe I was possessed and I went outside of my own free will, Finn. I don't know. It's in the past, you guys found me and brought me home, I'll never go within 20 miles of that foul place ever again. Okay. Adriana snapped. I saw Jarvan that day. Adriana's heart froze. The horrible slave trader who'd sold her, allowed him to be carted off in a filthy ship bound for Mayro, to be bound and branded like a cow. I was terrified that we wouldn't find you in time. Finn admitted in a quiet voice. I didn't know where to look. So when I heard fighting and turned a corner and saw that man holding you up in the air, like, he stopped, looking away. She saw the fear in his eyes then. She knew he was angry about a good many things, but where Rune was concerned, she'd genuinely scared him. I'm sorry. Adriana said softly. I won't ever do that to you again. The house was silent for a few moments. Realization dawned on her. Where are Mom and Dad? Council meeting. So late. Finn nodded. Started after dinner. Oh. She replied lamely. They still had so many other things to talk about, she wasn't sure where to begin. I'm sorry too. Adriana looked up at him in confusion. Finn's eyes were hard but sorrowful. I worked with him every day and had no idea. I should have known. So I'm sorry. Her shoulders drooped. Finn, it's not your fault. I'm your brother. It's my job to protect you. Adriana nodded. Still. I don't blame you. I don't blame any of you. Finn's eyes darted to her stomach before flitting away. What are you going to do about the baby? He nodded solemnly, avoiding eye contact. The blonde chewed her lip. I'm keeping it. Her brother frowned, his jaw set. He, or she, needs me, Finn. I can't just abandon it because of what happened. Finn shook his head. Your life will never be the same. My life already isn't the same. Adriana countered. There won't be a day that will go by that I won't remember it. Exactly, so why would you want to keep something that will remind you of it? The baby didn't ask for this. Adriana said quietly. I didn't ask for this. But it would be wrong of me to put my situation over his or her life. Finn frowned again. Why is that wrong? Because it's a life, Finn. Adriana replied. If one of our female dragons laid eggs and our barn was way too small, would we just throw the eggs over the cliff because they'd cause the future an inconvenience? No. Why? Finn tapped his fingers against the oak counter. Because we could just build a bigger barn. Exactly. We can adjust. We don't have to abandon and throw away. It feels like a mistake. Adriana made a face. Well, yeah. I mean, it's not what I wanted or ever planned on. But it is what it is. I mean keeping it. She stared at him for nearly a minute, shock taking over her features. You seriously want me to get rid of it? Finn frowned again. Standing up, Adriana walked over to the counter. Why? Things were finally looking up. Finn said flatly. And now, this. Adriana stepped back when he jerked his chin in the direction of her stomach. Horror twisted in her stomach and she shook her head. I'm trying to think of what's best for you two, Anna, even if none of you want to believe me. Finn stressed, walking around the counter. The last thing you need is a kid attached to your hip after what you went through. Tears burned her eyes. No. You want to spare me of any inconvenience. I don't see it like that. It's my baby, Finn. Everyone has a purpose, I can't just throw it away like it's nothing. Finn shook his head. It's unwanted, Anna. You don't really want it. You're just dealing with the circumstances as they've been dished out to you. I was the unplanned pregnancy, Finn. Adriana cried. Finn blinked, like he was unsure if he'd heard correctly. Mom and Dad didn't know there was two of us. But there was. And they fought for me. Dad fought for me. Adriana said, tears streaming down her face. They needed me just like they needed you. Just like this baby needs me. Brandine won't be around to be a good dad. So the last thing he or she needs is for me to abandon it too. You're thinking about this too much. No, I'm not. Adriana strengthened her resolve. I've always wanted to be a mom. What if this is the only child I can have? You're seriously looking into this too deeply. You're 17 now. You'll just make more with Eric once you two are stable. Adriana's face heated, but not in embarrassment. In pure anger. You leave him out of this. I won't have this one. You don't want this one. Finn shouted. Mom and Dad don't deserve this. Eric doesn't deserve all of this to be dumped on him because he didn't even do anything. Eric will put up with anything for me. Adriana snapped. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. What? He's my friend too, Anna. He loves me, Finn. Adriana shouted. It doesn't matter what you or anybody else thinks because to him, I'm worth it. Yeah. How does he feel about this? Finn pointed at her stomach. Adriana slapped his hand away. We haven't discussed it yet. Okay, you might want to get on that, because if he's ready to propose tomorrow, he needs to realize just what he's getting himself into. Seriously Finn, Eric is the smartest guy we know aside from Dad. Adriana rolled her eyes. I'm sure he's thought of everything. Yeah, I predicted that one. What? Nothing. Adriana wiped her face on her sleeve. Whatever. You just want to protect yourself. Finn stiffened. What now? You're only concerned about your reputation being scarred, Finn. Adriana drew herself up taller, willing herself to be strong in front of him. This has nothing to do with you, so you have nothing to worry about. Not true, because people are looking at me too. I wasn't even part of your little love triangle. Adriana had half a mind to slap him in the face, despite her regret last time that had happened. It wasn't a love triangle, Finn. I was raped. Finn ground his teeth together, seemingly regretting his words. If you can't come down from your own little perfect world and settle with the less than important people, then don't have anything to do with me. I don't want my child to have an uncle who hates them. Adriana stomped toward the stairs. She didn't want the rest of her night tainted any further. Finn shook his head angrily. Instead of estranging me from your little perfect world, you could just get rid of the real problem. Adriana whirled around halfway up the stairs. You're the real problem, Finn. I take it back. You are drama. Maybe if we dropped you like deadweight, there'd be a heck of a lot less problems around here. Her brother stepped back as if he'd been slapped. Hurt flashed in his eyes. Adriana didn't feel bad. He'd said plenty of horrible things to her. He didn't want to make amends. He just wanted to be right all the time. Well, she'd proved to him that he wasn't going to win this fight. She was going to have this baby and she was going to raise it either with or without him. The door suddenly opened and their parents strolled in, toothless on their heels. The adults and Night Fury halted upon seeing their twins standing 5 feet apart, fury etched on their faces. Is everything okay? Hiccup asked. Adriana sniffed, rubbing at her face. Oh yeah. Everything is fine. She turned and stomped up the stairs. She hovered in the hallway out of their view when her parents asked Finn what was happening. Nothing. Finn, don't walk out on me. Nothing, okay? Finn's voice echoed through the house. You guys just have fun making everything work out for her and I'll try to keep myself straight so I don't drag you down like dead weight. Adriana jerked at the bellow, clearly directed at her, before the back door slammed. The house was silent before Toothless warbled questioningly. She tiptoed to her bedroom and gently closed the door. She quickly changed in her favorite pajamas and curled up on top of her bed. She lay there in the silence for a long while, purposely shoving all thoughts of Finn and his opinions out of mind. She forced herself to relax and thought back to arriving at Cliff and Eric's house. She thought through everything that had happened that evening, from Cliff's antics until Eric dropped her off at home. She remembered every detail on the way Eric had held her and kissed her and, finally, after who knew how many years, told her that he loved her. A smile stretched across her face at the memory. She rested her hands on her stomach and nearly laughed. Maybe you'll have a daddy after all. Adriana snatched her diary off her nightstand and turned to the next pages, writing everything down until she had nothing left to write. She even wrote down some thoughts about Finn and what he'd said on a different page, keeping it separate from the amazing things that had happened tonight. She didn't want those pages tainted. It had to be a long while after midnight when a soft knock sounded. Adriana pushed her diary into her pajama shirt when her dad poked his head in. "You're still awake?" Adriana shrugged, closing her diary. "A lot happened tonight." "Yeah." Hiccup stepped in and sat down on the edge of her bed. She considered telling him what had happened with Eric, but, no. Not yet. She wanted a chance to talk things over with Eric. She wanted to discuss everything with him first. She felt a little guilty, considering it was her dad she was keeping it from. But she hoped one day he would understand. She was a big girl and she cared about Eric. She would figure this out. So instead, she shrugged. "I hung out with Eric and Cliff for a while. And then Finn." Hiccup frowned. "Your mom is out there talking to him right now." He was pretty agitated. He deserved it. Her dad raised an eyebrow, but said, "I won't ask what happened. I already know how he feels." "He told you that he wants me to get rid of it?" Adriana asked in surprise. "Yes. I had a feeling. It's not right, but, well, I can't really blame him." Adriana leaned back on her pillows. "Stubborn jerk." Hiccup smiled a little, but sobered. "Addie. I know he's hard to get along with. But he's your brother. And this is my child." "I know, Addie. But the thing is, at the end of the day, Finn would do anything to protect you." Adriana scoffed. "I mean it. Your disappearance terrified him as much as it terrified me and your mom. He shot that soldier without even blinking, Addie. Finn's got a hard head and strong opinions, but he does care. He wants what is best for you, even if his reasons are misplaced. He's not stupid for feeling the way he does. We shouldn't dismiss him like, how did you say it, deadweight?" Adriana winced. When he put it like that. Nothing crushes him more than telling him he's not needed. "Okay, I get it. But he wants me to murder my baby. Yet he isn't making this decision. You are. Finn will adapt when the time comes. He's good at that." She sighed heavily, dropping her diary and quill onto her nightstand. "If you say so." Hiccup smiled and stood, reaching over to kiss her forehead. "I do. Get some sleep, now. Dad. Do you think, maybe things would be easier if I got rid of it?" Adriana fiddled with the blanket in her hands. "I mean, I'm not going to, but..." Hiccup adjusted her blankets as he thought. "For you?" "No. You're not just saying that because it's me." "No. Well, yes. I'm saying it because I know who you are, not because you're my daughter." Adriana raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Hiccup smiled. "I've seen you go through many of difficult things. I honestly don't think that getting rid of the baby would heal you. Keeping it, becoming a mother. There's healing there. It might be just what you need." Satisfied, Adriana bundled under her blankets with a smile. "I like that answer." Hiccup smiled as he turned toward the door. "Good." She fell asleep to the sound of her dad's prosthetic hitting the floorboards, and the feeling of Eric's lips on hers. Chapter 18, Drawing a Line. Chapter text. With all the pounding his heart was doing, Eric was surprised passers-by weren't turning their heads to figure out where the racket was coming from. It seemed to echo in his ears. But, for once, it was pounding for a good reason. The best reason. He and Adriana had kissed. And not just any kiss. That was, wow. There was no other way to describe it. Their first kiss had been unsure, tentative. They weren't sure where they were going with it, it had just happened. Their second, well, that was a mistake. He had felt copious amounts of guilt for it. In the moment, it had been thrilling, but looking back, he really wished it hadn't happened. This kiss, though, third time really was a charm. Eric smiled so widely he felt the dimples forming on his face. He wished Adriana was here to kiss them. Then again, it wouldn't do to blush so much. He forced his mind to stay on track with some difficulty, as the mental image of Adriana, beautiful, sweet Adriana walking forward and kissing him again. Focus, Eric. The kiss he and Adriana had just shared was everything he could have ever dreamed it would be. And he'd had quite a few dreams on the subject as well. Dreams that made him glad Cliff couldn't read his mind. But now, this was a reality. Now that they had shared that moment, he knew. He knew what, on some level, he had always known. He and Adriana were meant to be together. It seemed ridiculous that he was only now coming to that realization after years of crushing on her from afar, after all the teasing the two had endured since their ages had been in the single digits. It was like they were the last to learn a wonderful secret. He had wondered, had scarcely dared to believe that their friendship could be headed in this direction, but now that this had happened, now that he knew exactly where she stood, there was no denying it anymore. His eyes wandered to his left hand. He briefly wondered if there would be a ring on his finger before long. Was it too soon to think about such things? Most men shuddered at the idea of commitment at such a young age, but Eric embraced it. He had found the right person. She was the best friend he'd ever had. The idea of falling asleep holding her every night was enough to make him wish he could turn around and kiss her some more. When he reached the front of his house, he took a deep breath and willed himself to stop smiling. Cliff would ask a million questions and he just wanted to go to bed and dwell on her lips against his. When he finally cooled down enough to look cheerful but not as giddy as he felt, he pushed open the door. Cliff was lying upside down on the couch, reading a book with a large picture of a fish on it. Eric was about to ask if Cliff was finally studying up on the family trade, his father ran the fishery, when he straightened up and turned his steel-grey eyes to Eric's. "You kissed?" Eric sighed. Of course Cliff would be able to tell. Turning his face away, he couldn't help the grin that forced itself onto his face. Cliff let out a sound that seemed to be a combination of maniacal laughter and the kind of cheer that wouldn't be out of place at a dragon race. He leaped from the couch and nearly tackled Eric in a hug. Finally, he shouted at the top of his lungs, making Eric wince. "And to think I was right about you two all along." Yeah, Eric grinned, pushing his friend away with a gentle nudge. "Bro, I haven't seen you smile that big in years." Cliff wagged his eyebrows up and down. "Care to share Zeddy's story?" Eric shook his head and flopped onto the couch. "It was so random." "Random? With the way she kept looking at you, I'm not surprised at all." "Well yeah, she was watching me a lot," Eric admitted. "But I didn't think she'd actually. That's the first time she's ever kissed me." He bit his lip in a grin, staring at the ceiling. Cliff was leaning over the back of the couch wolfishly grinning down at him. "Oh brew. So when's the wedding?" "Okay, let's not rush things." Eric sat up. "Should I wear cologne?" "Did you not hear what I just said?" Cliff stuck his tongue out at the older boy but stopped talking. Instead, he hopped over the couch so he could sit backwards on it, facing Eric and staring so intently, Eric felt like he was going to have to give a speech. So what? So what happened?" "Things went well, right?" Cliff made a face. "You didn't use too much tongue, did you?" "You, Cliff." Eric shuddered. "Why do you think I'm going to share every detail of my intimate life with you? Hey, better me than Finn." The stories he could tell you about making out. Cliff shrugged. "Again, you." Eric cringed. He didn't think Finn had kissed any girls in quite some time since he'd focused so much on working, but back in the day he could get pretty frisky. Not that Eric ever wanted to partake in such conversations. Bleh. "And it was really nice, okay? No tongue. Why am I even telling you this? You weren't involved." "Because I am your bra and I've been cheering for you and Anna for like, 2 years." Cliff placed his head in his hands, reminding Eric of the way Adriana looked when she was reading a particularly steamy romance novel. Tell me everything, Eric. Let me live vicariously through you. I'm going to bed. Noo. Cliff nearly knocked over the couch in his haste to block Eric's bedroom door with his body. We're having this conversation and then I will give you kissing tips. I have to get up early to meet Anna for breakfast. Eric said calmly, fully aware that he would easily be able to overpower the skinnier boy. Cliff stuck out his lower lip in a pout. It was almost cute. Almost. I'll tell you more when we get this sorted out. Eric crossed his arms. But I won't tell you anything if you don't let me go to bed. Cliff grumbled but stepped aside to let him pass. Don't think I won't hold you to that. I wouldn't ever think that, Cliff. Eric said, grinning at him. Good night. Good night, lover boy. Oh, shut up. Eric chortled, closing the door behind him. Now that he had the privacy to change into his pajamas and get into bed, he took his time. Finally, he sat down on his bed and took off his prosthetic. Though Hiccup could sleep with it on, Eric found it extremely uncomfortable. Though, he supposed, it would be easier to jump out of bed if the situation demanded it. But he didn't have any reason to need to do so. Unless he was a father. The thought popped into Eric's head without warning, making him pause in the act of propping his prosthetic against the bed. It was true though. Babies cried in the middle of the night. Children had situations 24 hours a day and he would have to keep an ear out for it. Eric had always wanted to be a father, this much was certain. But did he want to be a father now? Did he want to raise a child at 19? As much as he adored Adriana, the thought gave him pause. Was she worth giving up the opportunity to have a normal courtship period? Was she worth the bouts of nausea? The mood swings. Would he still find her beautiful when she was in her 9th month? He hated the uncertainty of it all. But, in the end, it was Annie. Perhaps the question was whether it was worth losing her for the chance at a less complicated relationship later on. As he curled into his blankets, he made a face. Because the truth was, he wanted Annie a lot more than he wanted an easy relationship. Maybe that was the answer he was looking for all along. Adriana absolutely detested getting up early. Especially now that she was pregnant. But after last night, she hopped out of bed with an eagerness that she hadn't felt before. Was she tired? Oh yeah. Was it worth a few extra yawns so she could have breakfast with Eric before he went to work? You bet. Astrid and Finn gave her identical raised eyebrows as she slipped on a jacket and strolled outside. She smirked at their confusion. They probably hadn't seen her get up this early in. She paused in thought. She couldn't remember the last time she'd gotten up this early. Eric was waiting at the opposite end of the bridge, a paper bag in hand and a metal tin in the other. She skipped the rest of the way, snatching the bag out of his hand and ignoring his whine of protest. Well, good morning to you too. Oh, sweet rolls. Adriana grabbed one out of the bag and shoved the bag back into his chest. He took it with an endearing smile. Thanks. Eric shrugged, playful smile still on his face. He nodded to the edge of the platform where they sat, dangling their feet over the edge between the wooden poles. Leaning against one of the railings and giving him a smirk, Adriana said, "It would appear that you and Cliff want to make me get fat sooner." Eric choked on his bagel. What? You both keep bringing me sweet rolls. He tossed his head indignantly. It's not our fault that sweet rolls are your go-to snack for stress relief. Oh, trust me, honey, Adriana snorted. Things are about to get a whole lot worse, I'm sure. Well, I could always just buy the bakery. Heck, I'll hire Ben as your personal baker. He could live in the barn, I suppose. Finn has a lot of junk up in the loft. Real cozy. Oh yeah, Ben will love this proposal. Eric chortled. Adriana knocked an elbow into his ribs, making him scooch away with a pout. Anyway. So. What exactly are we here for? Eric blinked. Breakfast. Well yeah, but we wanted to talk important stuff too. Adriana hummed, grabbing his tin mug. She twisted off the cap and peered inside. Oh, orange juice. You do know me well. Eric snorted, Well, after 15 years, I'd hope so. MHM. Adriana's muffled voice echoed in the tin cup, making him chuckle. She swallowed and wiped her mouth on her sleeve. Shut up. He grinned. No. Focus, Mr. Larson, we have important things to discuss. The look he turned her way made her stomach flop. What did I say about calling me that? Adriana only giggled in response, choosing to look at the sunrise instead. Eric swung his legs back and forth. So important things. Very important. Yup. Like, stuff. Adriana giggled. Where do we even start? I dunno, Eric shrugged. That's why all of this makes me nervous. I'm so ill-prepared. Seems to be a common thing these days, Adriana hummed. I'm 17 and I'm pregnant. That's like, the epitome of ill-prepared. Yeah. Eric nodded, eyes shooting to her stomach for a second as if he expected to visibly see a bump by now. I mean, I guess if this worked out between us, the baby would have two ill-prepared parents. Adriana looked at him, wondering how he paused at the last word. Obviously the idea would scare him as much as it scared her. He'd never been in this situation before either. Well, in that vein, everybody is kind of ill-prepared their first time. Right. Yeah, but... Eric sighed. It's just, different because of the situation. He rubbed his arm awkwardly. Eric, I hope. Adriana paused for a moment to collect her thoughts. I hope you don't think I said all that because I don't want to have this baby alone. I meant it. I'd have said it with or without it. I know, Eric said. There's a lot to think about. I haven't thought about it a ton, but I always kind of had some idea of how I wanted my first year or marriage to go. By way of a house and all that. I always admired how my dad did things, so I always thought I'd try to replicate what he did. Adriana smiled at the mention of Eric's dad. You still could? Yeah. Eric tapered off, staring at the rocks far below. She followed his gaze. He looked so unsure and afraid today, so much different than he'd looked last night. Are you second-guessing this? Eric's gaze snapped up. No, I mean, I want to do this right, Annie. I know, but you sound different than you did last night. Adriana said calmly. I don't want to make an emotional decision. Emotion clouds judgment. Eric looked her in the eyes. I love you more than anything, Annie, but we have to think about this wisely too. Are we even in a position right now that we could make this work? How long would we want to date? Do we wait until after the baby is born? Do we get married or break up if it doesn't work? Adriana asked softly, her heart sinking at the thought. Eric winced. I can't see how things can get much better between us. Honestly, we know everything about each other. The only thing to do would be to make the decision and ready the future, I guess. The way he said it with a sense of foreboding made her frown. You don't sound confident, Eric. He looked at her nervously. That's what I've been trying to tell you, Annie. It's not that I don't think it could work or that I don't care enough, but this is big and scary, you know. Oh, what am I talking about? Of course you know this. He sighed heavily, staring at the mists below. I want to do what's best for you. For us. He glanced at her hand, his fingers twitching in his lap. I don't want to mess this up or make it worse for you. Adriana reached over and took his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. He ran his thumb across her knuckles softly, carefully. It's a team effort. You don't have to work yourself to the bone to prove to me that we can do this. I have to be able to provide for you, Eric murmured, staring longingly into her face. She could see in his eyes how much this bothered him. How long do you want to live with your parents and brother with a baby? If we got married and didn't have a house, that's what would happen, and I don't want you to feel like. Adriana gently leaned forward and pressed a kiss to his lips. She pulled away and he pressed his forehead to hers. If I don't do anything, I'd be living there anyway and it would be fine. But that's not what I want to do. If I have to for a little while, I will. But I don't want us to shy away from a long-term relationship because we're afraid. Eric looked in her eyes. I'm tired of being afraid. I want to be able to take a hold of something with confidence, knowing that. Adriana smiled and took his face in her hands. That this is unbreakable. That nothing can shatter it. We've literally been through everything together. So let's make this happen. Eric smiled lovingly. I love you. She smiled, kissing his nose gently. I know. Now comes the hard part. Eric sighed. Adriana blinked. Hard part? Asking your dad. Oh. She slid her hands to his chest, straightening his shirt. Yeah. Might as well ask Finn, too. Oh, don't be ridiculous. Adriana rolled her eyes. Finn's had many less than promising relationships in the past. What do you mean? You make it sound like he dated more than Helga. Adriana paused. Well, not dated. Eric's brow furrowed. I don't think I want to know. She frowned, realizing she just painted a terrible picture of her brother. Forget it. He hasn't done anything in a long time. I prefer to keep my mind clean on the matter. Agreed. And anyway, Eric smiled, slipping a hand around her waist and pulling her closer. I didn't come here to talk about Finn. That's good because that just makes three awkward people. Adriana gasped and whipped around, huffing and clutching her chest as Finn snickered and kept walking. Gods, you scared me. Eric exhaled heavily as well, his hand loosening again at her waist. How long were you standing there exactly? Long enough to hear my name, lovebirds. Finn said as he cleared the rest of the bridge and leaned over the unprotected edge. Finn. Eric tensed. What are you doing? Adriana asked intently. Zap. Finn yelled down the chasm. Get your big butt up here, we're late for work. Eric and Adriana peered down the edge to see Zap twisting and twirling in the mists far below. Eric snickered. Crazy goon. You have no idea. Finn muttered. Fine then, no cod for you. They heard an indignant growl and Finn stepped back onto the bridge, holding up a hand. He counted down from 3, 2, 1. Zap blasted past Adriana and Eric, spraying them with water, and she went. Gah. Really, Zap? Adriana wiped off her face. The shock jaw landed on the bridge and chortled before shaking off the water on Finn. Oh gods, come on, stop playing around, Gobber's going to have my hide. He griped as he climbed into the saddle. See you later, lovebirds. The blonde duo watched the pair fly toward the village, amusement on their faces. Realization dawned on her and she breathed a laugh. What? Eric asked. That's the first time we've talked without any aggression in a while. Well, that's good. Eric gathered his things and made to stand, wincing when he put pressure on his bad leg. I better get to work too. Adriana stood, shaking water droplets out of her hair. Can I come? Well, Eric sighed. We're doing a lot of leather cutting today and staining. So? You shouldn't be around those kinds of chemicals. Oh. Adriana frowned. Besides, I have to run to my mom's house on break and, well, let's just do dinner tonight, okay? Eric asked. Okay. Adriana brightened. She grinned at the way his hair curled at the edges with the early morning humidity. All right, I'll see you tonight then. Eric paused before leaning down and capturing her mouth with his. His lips were still slightly moist from Zap's wet entry. Adriana sighed, wishing they could stay here all day. But Eric soon pulled away, face slightly red. Okay, I gotta go. Adriana bit her lip as he forcefully turned and walked away. See you later, babe. Eric turned an amused look over his shoulder and laughed. Adriana watched him go before skipping back to her house. Things were finally looking up. Pour those into the small bowl. Add 3 tablespoons of water. Mix it together. With the small whisk, Finn. Finn smirked, ignoring Inga's eye roll as he removed his finger from the dish and found the whisk. She'd been teaching him how to make various medical pastes for healing, along with herbal teas, poultices and other kinds of helpful things. While Mara's initial insisting he join the healing team for a brief time was originally a strange and unnerving thing, hey, Mara could be scary when she wanted to be, he'd found all this information helpful. He didn't know what other situations he'd find himself in, it would be good to some general healing knowledge. So this stuff is for anti-inflammatory. The oregano, garlic and ginger are really good natural anti-inflammatory components. And they make you smell like a pot roast. Oh, shut up. Hey, I like pot roast. Inga rolled her eyes once again, snatching the bowl from him. She added a little more water before pouring it into a jar and capping it. On tiptoes, she placed the jar on the shelf near Finn's forehead. Her dark hair swished over her shoulder as she turned to wash her hands in a nearby wash basin. So how's your sister doing? Finn frowned. He leaned against the table with crossed arms. All right, I guess. You guess. I haven't really talked to her in a few days. Things are chummy with Eric, so I think it's safe to say that she's okay. With a skeptical eye, Inga dried her hands on a towel and faced him. Why do you say that like it's a bad thing? Don't you think that the last thing Anna needs right now is a boyfriend? If it was anybody else, I'd agree with you. Inga said calmly. But it's Eric. Half of all this drama could have been prevented if it wasn't for him. You need to let it go, Finn. Inga scowled. This isn't about you and it's in the past. It is what it is. Finn tipped his head back with a sigh. He knew she was right, but he wanted to be stubborn and angry. She needs your support just as much as everyone else she cares about. Inga reasoned. According to her, I'm just dead weight. Finn muttered. What? Nothing. Inga frowned. She didn't mean that. I'm basically not welcome around her kid if I keep having my own opinions. Well, what kind of opinions do you have that would make her say that? Inga asked. You both have a tendency to say harsh things after all. Finn fiddled with his shirt sleeve. Even after admitting it to his dad and Adriana, he found it hard to admit to Inga how he felt. How is she supposed to raise a kid at 17? She shouldn't have to do it. Inga mulled over his words for a few moments. I can't imagine being in her position and I won't pretend that the decision is easy. But I know Adriana. I know Eric. This isn't about what's easy or what anybody wanted. Nobody would have asked for any of this. The decision is hers to make and she's had a hard enough time with everything leading up to this point. Finn, she was willing to run away and raise the kid on Bog Burglar Island. She never wanted to give the baby up, even after what Brandine did. Finn frowned at the name, but didn't reply. Maybe instead of focusing on what happened and what's changing, all of us need to band together and just support her decision. Inga said. The last thing she needs after all that is more drama in the family. She needs you just as much as your parents and Eric. What can I do? Finn asked. I don't know the first thing about kids and I'm not really the best guy to go to for relationship advice. If Inga felt as awkward as he did when he mentioned relationships, she didn't show it. Instead she said, you're the future chief of this village, Finn. You're her brother. You can stand up for her, protect her. There's strength and honor in a man willing to stand up for abused women. The words clicked in his brain. He'd seen abused women on Mayro. Not many since Ratri had him scrubbing the floors until his hands bled, and he'd only been a slave for a short amount of time. But the things he had seen had always stuck with him. He remembered the women with shackles on their wrists, chain links around their necks, tattered clothes, hopeless expressions. His sister now had something in common with them. Suddenly, guilt overwhelmed him. Gods! Finn whispered, finally understanding. I'm an idiot. Why did he always have to make everything about himself? His sister had been abused in the worst way possible and he was worried about what people might say about him behind his back. He was annoyed that he'd worked so hard for people to like him again and how dare she ruin everything by keeping an accidental baby. This was never about him. Inga stepped closer and looked up at him. I think someone deserves an apology. Finn exhaled. Yeah. She does. He looked out the window, the afternoon sunlight filtering through the blinds in golden streaks. Better get to it then. Inga smiled. Yup. Finn smiled back wanly. Thanks, Inga. She shrugged. Someone's gotta get through that stupid stubbornness. Ha ha. Finn opened the front door. See you later. Bye. Finn looked around the busy square in search of a familiar face who might know where his sister was. He'd hate to run home to find she was actually in the village somewhere. Eric and Cliff were probably on work break, so they could be anywhere. Zach was probably off pilfering the local fishermen's baskets down by the docks, so he'd have to walk everywhere he went. He picked his way through the crowds, scanning faces as he went and nodding to those who greeted him. After a few blocks, he spotted Magnus, Eric's older sister. He shrugged and walked over to her and her kids, who were playing in the street. Hi Magnus. The dark-haired woman looked up in surprise. Hi Finn. How are you? I'm all right. Finn smiled down at her kids, who were staring up at him with wide eyes. The little girl almost looked like a mini Eric. I'm looking for Adriana. Have you seen her around? She was with Eric at breakfast. Magnus stared into empty space as she thought. Actually, I think I saw her heading back to your house a little while ago. Finn winced. This area was farthest from their house, so she could have stopped anywhere. Oh well, I guess I'll head that direction then. Thanks. You're welcome. Have a good day. Magnus smiled. Thanks, you too. Bye kids. Finn waved. The little girl hid behind Magnus' skirts, but the little boy gasped. Mom, that's Finn. He whispered. Finn couldn't quite hide his grin at the awe in the little boy's voice. Magnus gave him a knowing smile before taking her kids' hands and walking away, Eric's nephew still staring after him. It was strange, but he remembered Eric mentioning how little kids adored the big kids, how cool they thought they were. Maybe having a little niece or nephew wouldn't be so bad after all. It would take a lot of time to get used to the idea. He really didn't know the first thing about kids. But maybe after some time, it would be fun. He made his way through the village, taking street by street. He wished Zach would pop out of nowhere so he wouldn't have to walk in the hot afternoon sun. He squinted up at the cloudless sky and frowned at the ocean beyond the nearby cliffs. There was even a breeze today. Ah, summer. Finn sighed to himself. The streets had narrowed the farther away from the village square he walked and the crowds had dissipated. Now and then a dragon and rider would fly overhead, but for the most part this part of the village was empty. Mothers and their kids were outside participating in village activities, fathers were out working their various jobs. It was strange to walk through the silent sections of the village when it wasn't night. In fact, if it hadn't been so quiet, he probably wouldn't have heard the sounds of a nearby scuffle, including the feminine cry of pain. Male or female didn't matter, but after everything he'd seen recently every instinct to protect coursed through his veins and Finn bolted down the street. Adriana usually enjoyed quiet walks in the afternoon sun, but now she was bored and lonely. After their long breakfast full of meaningful conversation, Eric had remembered he had some things he needed to do today. She asked if she could come, but some of that included going to his family's home, and she agreed that she didn't want to go there. She didn't want to face his mother and what stinging words she might have stored up. She'd wandered the village aimlessly for a while, checking in on her parents to see what they were doing. She'd avoided Finn when she saw him heading into the healers. He'd finally gone to get his stitches out of his forearm. She vaguely wondered if his almost daily visits to the healers wasn't intentional. But she didn't care what he was doing with his life. They had barely spoken since their fight and she didn't plan on speaking to him until he apologized. If he ever apologized. Ignoring any rude looks from some villagers, she'd bought a cinnamon bun from Ben the baker. The old man had given her a compassionate smile and given her an extra pastry for free, even after she'd insisted that she didn't need the extra calories. Ben had placed the pastry in the bag and given it to her anyway. The gesture reminded her of Ben and she'd genuinely smiled back. She'd eaten both pastries without regret. It was these small acts of kindness that reminded her that not everyone in the village was like Finn. Adriana kicked a loose pebble across the quiet streets, her hands in the pockets of her jacket. Even though the afternoon sun was high and stifling the air, she wasn't quite ready to take it off. She wasn't showing just yet, but it was a matter of security and comfort than warmth. One of these days she'd wake up and be huge. She'd heard many stories of pregnant women and the things they'd experienced. Worse was the fact that every woman's experience was different, so she couldn't even prepare herself for a cookie-cutter experience like everyone else. She could be the size of a moose by the end of the month. Her mom had mentioned looking for some of her old maternity clothes in the attic, or using some of Finn's old shirts as smocks if they needed to make new. They'd definitely have to make her some pants. Adriana kicked the pebble harder across the road with a sigh. Things were going to be so complicated. The pebble clattered across the dusty road until it was stopped by a black boot. Halting mid-step, Adriana snapped her gaze forward and saw Cale standing in her path. His dark shaggy hair swept across his brow, framing his brown eyes. The guy had always creeped her out and she hadn't sat at his table since before she'd chased Brandine away. But it was now that she remembered that the boys had been friends. Cale. Adriana. The blonde moved to walk around him, but Cale sidestepped to block her path. She glared up at him. Get out of my way, Cale. Or what? He smirked. You'll slice my face too. Adriana flinched. How did he know about that? She tried again to step around him but he kept blocking her path. Seriously, what do you want? She snapped, trying to keep her voice from shaking. The last thing she wanted to deal with was Cale's ego. The sound of shoes against gravel caught her attention. She turned a glance over her shoulder to see Free and Joel standing a few feet behind her. Her heart rate accelerated. Their expressions were the same as Brandine's had been that day in the barn. And once again, there was nobody else around. Adriana exhaled as calmly as she could. What do you want? Well, you're the village whore, aren't you? Cale crooned. She jerked, taking a step away from him. She froze when she remembered the two other men behind her. She tried to calm her pounding heart. If Brandine and Eric can get some for free, then well. Cale shrugged, eyes trailing down her body. Figured we'd stop by. She had to get away. She wouldn't let this happen again. Cale looked over her head at the other guys. Who's first? Adriana didn't wait another second. She slammed the toe of her boot into his knee, making him cry out and stagger in pain. Adriana turned and ran down the nearest street. The towering houses cast shadows across the winding streets as she ran. Heavy footfalls pounded not far behind. She had to get away and find somebody, anybody that would stop this from happening. She didn't care who it was, this couldn't happen. A hand snatched her arm and yanked her backwards. A yelp of pain exploded from her mouth as her shoulder muscle stretched too far. She vaguely heard the sound of her shirt tearing against the hand grabbing her. Using the momentum, she threw her elbow back and smacked Free in the mouth. The sound of bone snapping echoed across the walls and Free released her arms, spitting blood and grabbing his face. Adriana turned to run again but suddenly Joel was blocking her way. She rammed into his chest, trying to shove him away, but he held her shoulders tightly and whipped her around to face Cale, who limped forward. Adriana thrashed against Joel, hearing the collar of her shirt tear even more. Cale came within hitting distance and Adriana struggled, but she wasn't strong enough to fight Joel. Her breathing became panicked and hot tears flowed down her face. No, please, leave me alone. Cale breathed a laugh. Hold her arms up. Joel yanked her arms straight up by the elbows so she couldn't fight. Her entire torso was exposed to Cale's hands. Her child was exposed to him with no protection. Don't touch me. Adriana gritted through her teeth, struggling to free her arms. Cale smirked and moved closer. That's when Adriana hauled her knee back and slammed it right up between his legs. He nearly toppled forward with a growl of pain, catching himself on the wall behind Joel. Before Adriana could blink, Cale's fist connected with the side of her head beside her ear. Spots danced in her vision as her head snapped to the side. She went limp in Joel's hold, barely hanging on to consciousness. She couldn't focus on anything, the sight of Cale straightening to stand blurred in her vision. But the flash of silver caught her attention through the haze. Cale pressed the blade of a sharpened knife to her stomach and whispered in her ear. Make one more move and I'll spill your guts and it will be bye-bye baby. Adriana sobbed, sluggishly trying to fight against Joel. Free finally stood nearby, his face covered in blood. She briefly wondered if she'd broken his nose before Cale's other hand grabbed her by the waist. That's when the sound of running steps echoed down the corridor and Adriana's heart leaped. Her eyes snapped open just in time to see her brother emerge, a cry of anger erupting from his mouth. Cale barely had time to twist as Finn tackled him full force, sending them sprawling into the dirt. Finn's fist came down on Cale's face as they fell, but as they slammed into the ground, the most strangled cry of pain Adriana had ever heard came out of her brother's mouth. The fight ended as quickly as it had started. Cale grabbed Finn by the collar and hauled him to his knees. Adriana couldn't see what was happening since her brother's back was to her. Joel and Free were just as confused. "You did it to yourself," Cale hissed before shoving Finn onto his back. He hit the ground hard, his hands holding his right side. That's when Adriana saw the knife sticking into his torso, blood already soaking through his clothes. "No!" Adriana yelled, finally freeing her arms, or being released, and lunging to her brother's side. "No, no, no! Finn!" Joel swore. "Cale. Like I said, he did it to himself," Cale growled, twisting on a heel toward a shadowed corridor. "Let's get out of here." Free and Joel stared down at the bleeding air before turning and fleeing after Cale. Adriana's hands shook as Finn's face crumpled in agony, his breathing labored. "Finn. I don't know what to do, what do I do?" Finn gasped. Go get help." "No!" Adriana cried, her hands shaking against his chest. "I can't leave you here." "Anna," Finn coughed, his body spasming. He groaned, trying to speak. "I don't have time, you have to go now." "Now." Adriana scrambled to her feet and took off down the dark street, the opposite way that the boys had run. "Help! Somebody help us!" It felt like she'd been running forever when she emerged at the main street where the three men had cornered her. That's where she ran headlong into Thorin and Evan. Thorin grabbed her shoulders. "Whoa, what's?" Their eyes widened at her appearance. "Anna, what's?" "Finn." Adriana grabbed his shirt and dragged him down the street. "Finn needs help." The boys ran down the street, leaving her in the dust. The panic in her voice must have told them that something was very wrong. When they saw Finn barely conscious in the street, they skidded to a halt beside him. "Oh gods!" Evan carefully inspected the knife wound. "Finn." Thorin shook him by the chin. "Hey, look at me." Finn weakly opened his eyes, face already pale. Don't talk. We have to get him to Morris. Right now." Thorin shoved an arm under his shoulders, making her brother cry out in pain. "Sorry buddy. Come on, help him up." Evan and Thorin lifted Finn to his feet, doing their best to keep his torso straight. Finn still yelled in pain, panting through his grit teeth. Adriana followed them down the path. What do I do?" "Run ahead and tell Mara," Thorin instructed. Go. We'll be right behind you." She didn't want to leave her brother, but she knew that she had no choice. She moved around them and ran headlong down the street. Eric looked up from his work to the sounds of shouting down the street. "What in the world?" Horst muttered, shuffling over to the window and opening it. A red monstrous nightmare flapped nearby, its rider leaning over to yell into the window. "You better get to the healers," Snotlout called. Host tensed. "Why? What happened?" "Something happened to the Haddock kids. Hiccup is already on his way and they're getting Astrid." Eric didn't wait for anything else, he dropped everything and ran out of the shop and down the street toward the square, Horst and Cliff following at a distance. If they were calling the council members to the healers, that meant something bad had happened. Finn was the heir. If anything bad happened to him, it was a matter of security. And Adriana. Eric ran faster. His prosthetic slid on a patch of gravel when he rounded a turn, nearly running into Gustav. His brother grabbed his arm and kept him from getting a face full of dirt. They shoved their way through the crowd gathering in front of the healers. When Eric shoved the door open, he shot to the first blonde he saw. Adriana was standing at the end of a table where Finn was lying motionless except for his clenched hands and heaving chest. Her hands were on either side of Finn's face, she was shaking badly as she tried to keep him calm. "Annie," Eric said, putting a hand on her shoulder. He looked down at Finn and gasped. Blood was everywhere. Finn's shirt had been cut open, bandages were pressed around a knife handle sticking out of his right side. His face was ashen, hands clenched at his side. Adriana looked up at him with wide eyes. Eric tensed, a bruise blossomed on her left temple, mostly covered by her hair. But it was big enough to make her eye swell. Gods, what happened? Eric reached up and gently cupped her face. He was going to kill somebody. Inga materialized beside them, pressing another cloth around the knife handle. Finn jerked against the table, clenching his eyes shut. Hold him down. Inga commanded. Eric pushed his arms against his friend's chest. Hold still, Finn. Finn, you have to relax. Finn groaned, turning his face away. Blood seeped from the wound onto Inga's hands. Gods! She whispered, face pale. Eric knew that despite her calm expression, she was panicking inside. Mara and Heather swept in, shooing Adriana aside. Eric watched as the healers spoke quickly, trying to determine how long the knife was and if any major organs could have been damaged. The door slammed open and he knew Hiccup had arrived. The chief shoved his way through the councilman in the front room. He made to hold Adriana when his eyes snapped to his son. Finn. Hiccup gasped. What happened? I don't know. Mara said calmly. We need to get this out. I'm working on it. Well, work faster. Hiccup, you need to stay calm for Finn's sake. Inga, get me every cloth you can find. Eric, I need the room. Eric swallowed hard and backed away, walking to Adriana. Her hands were covering her mouth, still shaking, her eyes wide as she stared at Finn. Eric carefully stepped into her line of vision. Annie. She didn't seem to hear him for a few seconds, but when she looked at him, her eyes were full of terror. It's okay, Eric said quietly. He's going to be okay. Adriana swallowed hard. Eric carefully wrapped his arms around her and she buried her face in his shoulder. Her body was so tense. Eric noticed the sleeve of her shirt was torn around the back and she winced when his arm touched her shoulder. Eric heard shouting before Astrid ran in, straight to Finn's side. Her face was red from exertion, fear or windburn. She'd probably been all the way across the island at the academy. She brushed Finn's hair away from his face, demanding to know what happened. Finn's skin was pale and clammy with cold sweat. He groaned when Mara worked around the wound. It's okay, Hiccup murmured. Dad. Finn whispered. Don't talk. They were hurting Anna. Everyone in the room who could hear seemed to stiffen, except Mara, who kept analyzing the wound. Hiccup took a deep breath. We'll figure it out, Finn, don't talk. Finn's face twisted in pain, tears streaking into his hair. I tried to stop them. Hey, it's okay. Look at me. Hiccup locked eyes with his son. I will figure this out. You're the strongest kid I know. You are going to be just fine. Okay. Finn nodded shakily. Just breathe, okay. Astrid pressed a kiss to Finn's temple. It's cold in here. Finn whispered. Inga, get him a blanket. Right now. Mara commanded, but the girl was already off. All right, I think we're ready to extract the knife. I need the room cleared. Eric, take Adriana out. As soon as it is removed, I need to work quickly. Inga returned with a blanket, draping it across Finn's waist. Eric saw fear in her eyes as he gently steered Adriana out of the room. Mara stood up straight, looking her apprentice in the eye. Inga, wait outside. Inga blinked. What? The healer set her hands on Inga's shoulders. I don't want you to do this operation. For your sake. Usually Inga would argue, but she swallowed hard and nodded. She looked down at Finn unsure, but she already found him looking up at her. "Es okay," Finn whispered. "I'll see you in a bit." Inga's calm demeanor faltered for a second. She nodded, putting a hand on his arm for a moment before leaving the room with fast steps, closing the door behind them. "All right," Mara said calmly, the parents watching in dismay as she poured a small amount of liquid on a cloth. "I'm ready." Astrid kissed Finn's forehead again. Hiccup rested a hand on his son's head with a look of brokenness. Mara took a deep breath and carefully pressed the cloth over the teenager's mouth and nose. Be strong, Finn. Within seconds, their son's vibrant blue eyes closed and his body slumped against the table. Eric didn't know how long they stood waiting. He'd been holding Adriana in a warm embrace, his cheek against her hair, her cheek against his shoulder, long enough for his stump to start hurting. But he made no moves to sit down or disturb Adriana, who hadn't moved, made a sound or shed a single tear since he'd arrived. She had to be in shock. So he'd ignored everyone standing in the front room. Council members, Cliff, even his big brother who'd tried to say something encouraging earlier. Thorin and Evan had said a few quiet words to Snotlout and Fishlegs, since they'd been the ones to bring the Haddock twins here. He didn't know what had happened, but Adriana had been bashed over the head and Finn was. Eric closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, forbidding himself to panic. Finn was going to make it through this. Even after all their recent fights and disagreements, he wouldn't allow himself to consider the alternative. After an eternity of silence, the door opened and Hiccup walked out, his hands and arms covered in his son's blood. He seemed to stare at nothing as he walked to the nearest wash basin and began scrubbing his hands. The room was so quiet, one could have heard a pin drop. Astrid was the next to emerge, her face set in determination. She stood with a rigid spine as she too began scrubbing her hands and arms. Inga pulled out of her father's embrace, grabbing a bucket and heading outside to get more water. Hiccup's scrubbing turned near frantic when Astrid reached over and grabbed his hands. "He'll be okay." Hiccup's shoulders dipped and he slowly inhaled. Eric couldn't see his face but he knew the chief was trying to keep it together. They still didn't know what had happened. The chief took another deep breath and slowly nodded, as Mara and Heather swept out of the room. Hiccup and Astrid stepped away from the basin as Inga returned, filling new basins and removing the filthy water. "Thank you, Inga," Mara said softly. Snotlout broke the silence. "Well." Mara's composure didn't break. "As long as we can keep the wound from getting infected, he'll be alright." Relief hit him so hard, Eric thought he might start crying. Cliff laid a hand on his shoulder and squeezed. Adriana seemed to shatter, a sob finally breaking her silence. Hiccup was there instantly, gently pulling her out of Eric's arms. Seeing her in Hiccup's arms, Eric caught sight of the long tear in her shirt from the collar and arm to halfway down her back. Someone had grabbed her and she'd fought. She shook like a leaf in Hiccup's arms as he quietly shushed her. "Finn's okay. He's going to be okay," Cliff finally whispered. "Eric, what happened?" Eric shook his head. Hiccup gently lifted his daughter's face out of his shirt. "Addie, baby, hey, breathe. Breathe." Adriana nodded, trying to calm down. "I need you to tell me what happened." Hiccup's eyes focused on the bruise and a fire lit in his eyes. "Who did this?" Adriana hiccuped, holding on to his wrists for stability. "C-Kale, A and F Free and J Joel. THW wouldn't he leave me alone and F Finn." She broke down into tears again. He tried to stop them and he fell on the knife, he didn't know it was there. Astrid's composure broke. She ground her teeth and looked down, trying to hold in tears. Eric felt his own eyes burn. Hiccup swiped his thumbs across his daughter's cheeks. "Did they touch you?" Adriana nodded. J. Joel held my arms back and C-Kale was going to a sob cut off her words. "Okay," Hiccup whispered, pulling her back into his chest. "Okay. Sure. Finn got there before anything happened." "Who hit you?" "Kale." "Okay." Hiccup held her tight while she cried. "Sure, it's over now." Except for the sound of Adriana's tears, the room was silent. Every council member had heard the story. Even through the haze, Eric realized that this was why they came for security situations involving the heirs. Hearing the story by word of mouth was important. Everyone in the room looked ready to grab a weapon. As if on cue, Snotlout stepped forward and locked eyes with Hiccup. At long last, Adriana finally calmed down enough to catch her breath. Hiccup gently pulled her back and looked in her eyes. "I want you to stay here with Eric. Talk to Mara. I'll be back soon, okay?" Eric stepped forward and put a hand on her shoulder. She instantly turned into his arms. "What are you going to do?" Eric asked. Darkness enveloped the chief's eyes and he locked eyes with his council once again. "Don't worry about it." With that, he turned and marched out the door, the rest of the council on his heels. In passing, Astrid told him, "We'll be back soon," before following her husband outside. Eric held Adriana tightly, drinking in the sudden silence for a moment. She seemed to be drained of energy, but Mara quietly stepped forward. "Anna, I have a room for you next to Finn's, if you'll come with me." Adriana sniffed and straightened. She looked at Eric with bloodshot eyes for a moment before turning and following Mara to a room. The door closed behind them, leaving Eric, Cliff and Inga standing in silence in the main room. The people parted for the chief and his entourage, bursts of anxious conversation rippling the crowds. Toothless pushed his way through the council members until he was walking in stride with his rider, both sets of green eyes sharp with rage. "Find them," Hiccup instructed. "Search every house, every side street, the woods, do whatever it takes. I want all 3 of them found now." "Yes, sir." The council members split into various directions on foot and took to the air. Astrid and Stormfly marched beside Hiccup and Toothless, eyes scanning the villagers milling the streets. Everyone steered clearing of Burke's leading couple, none too eager to get in their way. "There are only so many hiding places," Astrid said. "What exactly do we plan to do when we find them?" Her husband said nothing, almost as if he hadn't heard her. Astrid faced forward once again, unholstering her axe when she heard shouting up ahead. Horst and Manny the Mad emerged from a nearby street, tackling Joel to the ground. The shaggy-haired man stared up at the haddocks looming over him with wide eyes. "It was an accident, I swear." Astrid twisted her axe in her hand. "Tell me, was holding my daughter down an accident too?" "Bring him," Hiccup said in a thin voice before walking past, Toothless on his heels. Joel struggled against the councilman as they yanked him off the ground and followed the haddocks. Astrid tightened her hold on her axe handle, wishing she could split him in 2 right now. It took less than 10 minutes for Gustav to fly overhead with a swearing free dangling from Fanghook's claws. The monstrous nightmare practically threw the young man in front of the haddocks. Free scrambled to his feet and tried to back away, but was blocked by the Larson and his dragon. "Found him in the woods," Gustav sneered. Astrid took in the sight of Free's emaciated face, his nose broken and dried blood all over his shirt. He'd clearly tried to wash his face of the blood, but with his broken nose, his cleaning job had been poor. Hiccup's fists shook at his sides. "Looks like my daughter broke your nose for me," Free sneered. "Lucky me." "Oh no," Hiccup breathed a laugh, leaning down to his level. "I've got much better plans for you." Tough Nut and Gustav grabbed him under the arms and dragged him after the group. "Find Kale." Hiccup turned to the growing crowds. "I want him found now." "I've got him." Astrid turned to see Snotlout shoving his nephew through the crowd with a knife at his throat and a strong hand on his collar. Kale glared at the haddocks with an evil eye. Astrid's hands shook at the sight of her son's blood on the man's shirt. Hiccup held his gaze for a few seconds before leading the way toward the docks. People ran to the edge of the wooden fences on the cliffs as the chief led his councilman with the 3 men behind. Hiccup's footfalls were hard on the wooden planks before he stopped in front of the smallest rowboat. Joel and Free's eyes were wide in shock, Kale's eyes merely flitted to the chief. Free and Joel were swiftly deposited into the boat. They struggled for a second to keep from toppling sideways into the ocean. Hiccup lashed out a hand at Kale's shirt, nearly cutting his hand on Snotlout's blade. He dragged the boy forward until they were nose to nose. "I gave you a chance to live on my island peacefully," Hiccup sneered. "You just lost it." With a vicious shove, Kale toppled into the boat between the 2 boys. Hiccup snatched the axe out of his wife's hand and, without warning, slammed the blade toward the belly of the boat. Kale leapt back with a vicious curse as the wood splintered and water sprayed their feet. Joel and Free gaped. "Outcast Island is a 4-hour boat ride from here," Hiccup crooned in a smooth voice, handing the axe back to his wife. "You have too." "Hiccup, you're insane," Free shouted, dodging the oars being thrown at them. Joel caught one against his chest, nearly falling backwards. "Enjoy the thunderdrums at the crags. They love a good meal late afternoon." Hiccup smiled. Joel glared. You've proven dragons don't eat people. Hiccup made a face up at the open sky. Yes, people. Thunderdrums are smart and stubborn though, they know cruel, evil people when they smell them. So like I said. Have fun. With that, the chief turned around and walked back through the crowds. Hiccup. Joel yelled. I'm from Burke, you can't just banish me. The chief pulled Snotlout aside. If they set foot on this island again, shoot them on sight. Done. Astrid followed her husband up the walk, not wasting another second on worthless people. They didn't turn when their names were called or enjoy the satisfaction of watching them row away. The only pause they took was at the top of the stairs where Heather stood, watching her little brother's banishment with a blank expression. She faced them, no judgment in her eyes. Only understanding and sorrow. Hiccup rested a hand on her shoulder for a brief second before continuing on. Astrid gave her a tight-lipped nod and followed her husband back to the healers to sit with their ailing children. Chapter 19, Oasis. Chapter text. The Haddocks didn't sleep that night. For hours they sat by Finn's side, keeping watch as he lay motionless, except for the occasional twitch of his eyebrows and the rise and fall of his chest. Mara checked the wound repeatedly throughout the night. If there was one thing Hiccup hated, it was waiting. After hours of staring into space and Astrid pacing, he finally stood and crept to Adriana's room. He smiled wanly at the sight of Eric slumped at the edge of her bed, nearly falling out of his chair. Adriana was curled up on her side, one arm tucked beneath her head, the other holding Eric's hand. If any good came of this, it was Eric's support. The chief quietly grabbed a few blankets and lay one on each of the kids. Eric stirred for a second before relaxing again. Hiccup briefly considered waking him up and telling him to go home, get some comfortable rest. He decided against it, knowing that the boy wouldn't leave Adriana. He left the door cracked open and went back to Finn's room, leaning in the doorway as Astrid smoothed their son's hair and blankets for the millionth time. His skin had become clammy the last few hours as his body tried to heal itself. The wound had become an angry red around the stitches. Mara said as long as no fluid came from the wound and Finn didn't come down with a fever, things were alright. His prosthetic squeaked and Astrid looked up at him. He hated that exhausted, terrified look in her eyes, accented by dark circles and a half-done braid. With all that they'd been through together with their children, he'd begun to hope things wouldn't always be so hard, that things would slow down and their kids could have a normal life without something going wrong at every turn. As soon as he'd thought that, he'd discovered the truth about Brandine and how he'd mistreated his baby girl. Things hadn't slowed down since. Hiccup. He met her eyes, wondering if the same haunted look was mirrored in his own eyes. Astrid pulled his empty chair closer to her and patted it gently. He sighed and joined her, taking her hand. They sat side by side, watching their son breathe. Mara would be back soon to check the wound again. As calm and direct as the healer was, they could see in her eyes how tragic the ordeal was and that she too wished they weren't in this situation. I wish I wasn't, the chief Hiccup whispered. So we could pack up the kids and just go. Astrid squeezed his hand, nodding. That would be nice. Hiccup didn't want to feel self-pity for what had happened, but once again he found himself asking why his kids couldn't catch a break. It wasn't fair to belittle any losses and struggles other children and teenagers had faced, but he couldn't think of one that was this extreme. It seemed like a constant occurrence, a black cloud hanging over their heads and waiting to see where the lightning would strike next. Astrid leaned into his chest and wrapped her blanket around them. Adriana. Sleeping. Eric is still with her. I think if you hadn't banished them, Eric would have killed them himself. I think at this point we would have a riot on our hands. Too many people were tired of Cale and all of his issues. He had plenty of chances. Astrid opened her mouth to reply when Finn suddenly stirred, a groan forcing its way out of his mouth. Instantly they were on their feet, looming over him. Finn? Astrid asked, smoothing his hair back even as his face twisted in pain. What happened? Astrid nearly cried with relief and kissed his forehead. Finn exhaled shakily, feeling his side beneath the white wrappings. Gods, did I break my ribs? Hiccup breathed a laugh. Not quite, kiddo. Astrid checked Finn's forehead for a fever and he turned away with a groan. Stop, smothering. Astrid, let the boy breathe. He's done nothing but breathe, Astrid replied, still playing with her son's hair. How do you feel? Like I got ran over by a wagon. Finn, I'm serious. Does your head hurt at all? Are you cold? No. What happened? What do you remember? Hiccup asked gently. Finn rubbed his eyes. I was trying to stop Kale. Suddenly his eyes snapped back open and he jerked to his elbows. Anna, he gasped at the pain lacing up his torso at the sharp movement. No, don't get up, Astrid put her hands on his chest. She quickly checked his bandages to make sure there was no blood. Stay down, Finn. Hiccup said calmly, a hand on his shoulder. The last thing you want to do is sit up right now. Now you tell me. Finn hissed through the pain. Hiccup glanced at the wrapped bandages. Your sister is fine. Eric is sleeping with her. Finn lifted his hand from his face with an amused smile and Hiccup paused. No, wait. His son laughed, a sound that he nearly wanted to cry over. But he had to fix his blunder, even as Astrid rolled her eyes up at him. They're in the same room but not together. Finn grinned despite the pain. Thanks, that really clears it up. Astrid shook her head. Sometimes, Hiccup. No, you two shouldn't have such dirty minds. Yeah, Finn sighed, eyes drooping already. But she's okay. Yes. Hiccup replied. How did you know where she was? I didn't. Finn frowned. I was looking for her to talk and was just passing through. I'm glad I found her. You saved her, Finn. Hiccup squeezed his son's shoulder. I can't thank you enough. Don't, Dad. She's my sister. Finn murmured, rubbing his eyes. How long have I been here? It's almost morning, so not even a full day yet. Astrid replied gently. Go back to sleep, Finn. Not while you guys are standing over me like a couple of creepers. Hiccup rolled his eyes. Listen to your mother. Finn smirked. But I like being a rebel. All the same, Astrid kissed her son's forehead once again. You need to rest. Go to sleep. Once he stopped fighting it, Finn was asleep within a minute. Astrid sighed and braced her forehead on her palm, shoulders shaking with relief. Hiccup rested his hands on her shoulders and squeezed. He'll be okay, Astrid. He'll be okay. The healer's house was quiet when Adriana finally stirred awake. The light filtering in through the thin curtains was grey with early morning air. Carefully, Adriana rolled onto her back and stretched, wincing when her shoulder twinged painfully. She sighed and smiled at the sight of Eric slumped beside her on the bed, body half falling out of his chair, his hand loosely holding hers even in sleep. A thick blanket had slid down his shoulders and pooled around his waist. With his face mashed into the crook of his elbow, he couldn't be comfortable. She almost wanted to wake him up and pull him beside her on the bed so he could at least be on a flat surface. Then again, he seemed to be fast asleep and hadn't noticed her wake up yet. Best to let him sleep for now. Carefully, Adriana brushed a wavy strand of hair out of his eyes. He looked so calm and peaceful when asleep, that calculating eye and slight pinch of his brow smoothed over. She couldn't remember the last time she'd seen him in such a quiet state. Eric had stayed by her side all night, after Mara had cleared her and the baby and sent her to bed. He'd held her hand, smoothed her hair back and whispered quiet assurances in her ear until she'd succumbed to exhaustion. She didn't remember falling asleep. Apparently he'd never left. The thought made her smile, despite what had happened yesterday. Of course she wished no more bad things would happen to her and her family, and even now she desperately wanted to know if Finn was okay, but it was an amazing thing to see Eric's willingness to stick around through thick and thin, no matter what. She gently brushed her fingers through his hair, watching him sleep, thinking through everything that happened yesterday. Her father had banished Kale and the other two boys. She was shocked that he hadn't killed them for what happened, because it seemed like something her dad would do for nearly killing Finn and daring to lay a hand on her. But she supposed, even then, her father was, mildly, merciful. She knew, however, that if they ever set foot on Burke again, there would be no mercy left. Eric deeply inhaled, a frown on his face as he reached up and grabbed the hand still playing with his hair. At tickles. Adriana breathed a laugh, whispering back, "Sorry." He groaned, stretching his neck with a wince. "Ow. You should have gone home." Eric frowned at her. "I didn't want to." "Yeah, but now you'll be uncomfortable all day," Adriana said quietly. "I'd rather be uncomfortable with you than comfortable at home not knowing if you're okay," Eric said, rubbing his eyes. "How are you feeling?" Adriana shrugged. "My arm is sore." Eric brushed a finger against her eyebrow. "Your eye isn't as swollen." "That's good."